There we are. Ooh. Hey now. All right. Happy Wednesday. It is Wednesday once again. Halenville Live 905. Shortly after 9, May 25th, 2022. Yeah, Charles Green along John Conklin.
It's good to see you
How
guys.
you guys doing? What's happening?
What's going on? How you guys doing?
Excellent. Absolutely.
Wonderful today. It's been a pretty good day.
See, Tony, you're all coordinated, color coordinated tonight,
Am I?
Who's rocking it?
right? I'm
Okay.
colorblind, but you look color coordinated to me.
All right, as long as it's not pink. Everything that the more closer or farther back reds kind of become other things. So yeah. Yeah.
So who we got in the chat here? Say hello to everybody.
Let's see who is hanging out tonight. We got a big show, guys. We got a special guest or two in the
Two.
green room. And we're going to deep dive on the Floyd Rose. And this is going to be a good one tonight.
Yeah.
Guys. You're gonna
Anybody
like
anybody with Floyd questions, get them up there in the chat, and we'll try to go through them all.
You are
and
in
cover them
for a
all.
treat.
Yes,
Yeah. So let's start at the bottom instead of the top. Mr. Ty Price. Hey, Ty.
Hey, Ty.
Nice explorer.
Good to see you, Ty.
There, Ty. Good to see you. Sandra is in the chat. Hello.
Sandra.
Dan of New Jersey.
Dan,
Let's
what's going on,
scroll it
brother?
up.
Yeah.
Christopher Livesour.
Christopher. Good to
Thomas
see you,
Santiago.
Thomas.
Right.
How you doing,
on.
brother?
And Dave Z. Good to see you,
Dave.
Dave.
See you, Dave.
Yeah, man. Adam Roach. Hey, Adam.
Adam.
Good
Right
to
on,
see
brother.
you. Daniel Vanderleiden. Welcome.
Daniel.
Yeah, man. Welcome.
What's up, Daniel?
Tim Thomas, Leo Safko. Hey, guys.
Tim, Leo.
Good to see both you guys. It's
Matthew
good to see you.
Stewart.
Matthew.
Papa Blue. Good to see
Blue.
you guys.
Good to see you, Papa.
All right, let's scroll it up. Chili Beef.
Chili,
Welcome.
what's up?
Jerry
Chris
Lyca's here. Hey, Jerry. Holly
Jerry.
Lewis.
Jerry, Holly.
Nice to see you, ma'am.
Chris Hunter. What's up, Chris?
Good to
Chris.
see all you guys. Holly. Hey, Holly. Chris.
All right, let's still scroll up. Still going. All right, we'll catch them when they come in. Welcome,
Matthew.
everybody.
Welcome, you guys.
Yeah, so if you're not subscribed here, do subscribe. We do Van Halen shows every Wednesday night.
Yes, we do.
We do rock memorabilia, guitar picks every Saturday night here on the channel. So a lot of stuff happening. And if you're watching on replay, thank you for watching. And leave a thumbs up on your way out. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
KXM Rock, welcome.
KXM, what's going on, bro?
Yeah. So let's I'm gonna turn it over, John, to you, and let's get this show on the road, dude.
All right, guys. So yeah, it's a good one tonight. So it's going to be all about the Floyd Rose, and we found the two guys who are like the Floyd Rose guys, and they got a lot to go through tonight, and other cool stuff too. We'll talk about too tonight. So let's not wait any longer. Keep them waiting. Tony, you want to bring them in?
Yep. Mike McGuire.
Hello.
Daniel Drewek. Guys.
What's going on, gentlemen?
There you go.
On. Excellent.
What's up, guys?
Darren, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
Really good. Glad to be on.
Good to see you guys. Welcome.
How's everybody doing?
Good, Mike. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to this one for quite a while. This is going to be a good one.
Me too, John.
So first of all, let's talk about you guys. So Mike, you're in Vegas. Darren, where are you?
Wisconsin.
So how did you guys meet? How did you guys come to know each other?
I sent him an email. I was looking for a Floyd Rose, and I sent him an email. And from there, we just started talking about Floyd's, and I had no idea how long his site had been up, but I was glad it was, because I didn't know too much about Floyd's. And then, we kind of just started talking every day, every other day up until now. This was start of the pandemic around there. So 2 years, 2.5 years.
We both collect Floyd's, so we eventually ran into each other, and he found the website, and it kind of went on from there, because we're both psychotic and we have way too many Floyd's laying around. And so we wheel and deal too together with Floyd's. We buy and trade, sell stuff too.
So between you guys, you have every important iteration of the Floyd Rose, correct? I mean, that's safe to say, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean,
I think we got everyone. Yeah, except the one on the. Well, there's the one. Yeah. Well, we'll get into this, but yeah, there's a few that are kind of tough to find, like the one the Kramer ad and some of the early FRT5 prototypes we may not have yet, but maybe in time we will get them. But yeah, we have pretty much every single one.
That's
Approximately how many are there?
Well, if you go, whale tail. Well, if we're talking like in 1983, previous to that, I mean, if you include all the different variants, there's so many different variants, like in the FR, with, again, this is 20, you could say, variants between 1978 to 1983. There's probably, well, maybe not that many, maybe 15.
And then there's variants within variants too, because, there's some FRT3s that, depending on, if they were first in production, second in production, third in production, there's little differences in between those. And so
why is that?
That is it.
Why is that? Is that a coming from a production standpoint?
They were probably trying new things, like the arm collar. The original ones had, just the screw-in bar with the nuts and the washers and everything. And then
there could be quality control and things like that.
Yeah, samples of them right there. If you want to hold them up, if you got one handy or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean,
so basically, it was a work in progress, right? It was what was showing up, right?
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah.
And when would you guys say they finally they kind of nailed it to a? Was that 83? That
83. Yep.
83. That's when. That's when it was pretty much perfected to what we see. Still now. Really, how many major changes happened after that?
Not a whole lot. I mean, so the 83 you had the German. So when before Kramer guitars, there's a whole crazy history. We'll probably eventually get there, but once Kramer guitars hit, it was basically done. They had the Hanson Metalwork whale tails for briefly, and then they had the German Floyds that were on every Kramer guitar, throughout the 80s. Mm-hmm. And that did not really change. They had like lower quality, lower cost versions, but it hasn't really changed in the last 40, within the last, 35 years, really. It's kind of crazy.
There was really no need to change it.
Still the same.
So what year is the first one?
Well,
when did that show up?
There's a long and short story to all this, I guess. But so it's started in 76. So the first prototype was 1976. It was a brass prototype. His bandmate Greg Golden was put on some kind of 1970s Les Paul, and there was more prototypes we probably don't know about, but this is the first one we do. And it was he basically had a Bigsby with a locking nut made out of brass, because he wasn't worried about the trend then. He was worried about locking the locking nut, so what prevent the movement. So that was 1976. The next one he made is in 1977. It's called the patented prototype. It's so this one he has a different bridge to it. So he has the locking nut, which fits into a fender, a fender slot with the locking nut, and then the trem is kind of like a prototype to the FRT1. So that was 1977. So that was like so this prototyping phase was like 76 to 1977. He's experimenting. He wrote the patent in 1977, and then the FRT1, which is the first one Eddie had on the Bumblebee, right? That he supposedly finished that in about 1978.
So let me ask you a question. So let's go back a little bit before that. where did Floyd come from? What did he do for a living? What was he? I mean, was he from Seattle? Was he from New Jersey? Where was he from?
Yeah, supposedly Seattle, and he worked for a machine shop or jewelry company is what so he had a little bit of experience, and so
he was in Reno for a little bit too.
Oh yeah,
Reno,
And he was a guitar player. I mean,
yeah, because he played Jimi Hendrix. He was in played a lot of Jimi Hendrix stuff in a band. Yeah, and I mean he actually had even in the 80s he had a band too as well, and yeah, he had a Fender Strat, and I want to stay in tune, so he put glue on the lock on his Strat to that's where the issue is the string movement and the nut, right? And he put super glue in it, and that's kind of was his revelation. Well, if I lock the nut here, that's going to help things out, and that's when
I have never heard that before.
Yeah,
have you heard this before, John?
I never have. So that locking nut, that was his kind of obsession, I guess. Because the fine tuning came later, right?
Yeah, the trem part. Yeah, exactly. The trem. He didn't focus on the actual trem part until about 77, right around there. He was mainly focused on the perfecting the locking nut, and the early locking nuts are actually fit into a Fender. A Fender size one, it's a little thinner one, like the modern ones. We can go on that a little later too, but he used brass, just as a prototype because it's easier to mill, so just simpler to steel. And then, I mean, the very first prototype he made, he kind of made like a Bigsby style. He kind of connected to a Bigsby with the locking nut, and it wasn't double locking them. And what I mean by that is it didn't have like the insert blocks and the trem. It was just a kind of more like a string through model. That was the very first one he made. And there's photos of it. The guy still has it. Greg Golden in Reno, Nevada still has it. It's in a display.
Is that Bizarre Guitar up there?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
He was Floyd's bandmate. Mm-hmm.
Now, so Randy Hansen was kind of an important guy in this whole thing too, right? He was like a Hendrix kind of guy, right? Really big. That's what I've known him from the Hendrix thing like that. He was like the white Jimi Hendrix kind of guy, right? From Seattle.
Yeah, he's from the Seattle area. Yeah, and Floyd Rose was a sound man for his band, so that's how he kind of got to Randy Hansen. Randy Hansen acquired the first FRT ones, so the ones that Eddie had on the Bumblebee. Randy Hansen acquired the first two, is what he told me.
The first kind of production ready to go units, before then they were literally prototypes, not necessarily functional, but just got the idea right. And then Randy got the very first, production model.
And what year would that have been around? Would that be around 77, 76?
Probably 78. It could be very late 77. No one's really exactly sure, but it's 1978 sometime.
So it's safe to say that Floyd probably really wasn't even aware of who Eddie Van Halen was, because really nobody was until 78, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah,
they weren't local to Southern California, so they probably wouldn't have really heard about him.
And I guess because Floyd wasn't thinking about the trem at all. It really, like you said, at that point. So I guess Randy Hansen was used. Obviously, he was the guy with a trem guy because he was doing the Hendrix stuff and wanted to keep it in tune. So he was probably the first guy that figured into the actual trem part of it, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, Randy Hansen. So at the back step, Floyd Rose also knew Lynn Bells with the Boogie Bodies. So I'm not sure when it all, but all these guys kind of knew each other a little bit. And there's the story. So there's a couple different stories with the FRT one and how Ed. So it's called the FRT one, but they actually called it the Rose Tremolo. Hang on. So this is supposedly Neil Sean's they use. This is actually Neil Sean's one of the first ones he used on his Norland Les Paul. This is one that had on his Bumblebee, right? So it's non-fine tuning. This is the same style. This is a USA one, so this is very, it's pretty similar to it. And usually these it said Rose. They were called the Rose Tremolo. They weren't called Floyd Roses then. They were called the Rose Tremolo system, and then eventually changed that. So that's what it kind of looked like.
How big is the block on that? on that one right there. If you could show that.
It's about there's different variations. There's two different block sizes. This one's about 6 or 7 millimeters, but there's another one that's a slightly bigger than it, just a hair. And and later on, I seen a photo of Ed and his Bumblebee. I think his was there's like no photos of it really. There's not from the FRT one. So they looked like a tad bigger than this one. But I can't really tell. There's not a lot of good photos.
Very cool.
So the bar on that looked like it stayed pretty much the same all the way up to the FRT5, right? They kind of kept that long threaded, and that has the nut on the other side of it.
Yeah, they're pretty similar. It's quarter inch bar made out of stainless steel, and they're pretty similar. Yeah, up to the whale tail, Mike. I think right. They're pretty. Is this similar to a whale tail? I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean the only differences are really the bends vary just a little bit, but I mean it's the same. You have the lock nut and the jam nut and 2 washers, but the earlier ones had a leather washer. The one I have, I don't know who did it, but it's like pieces of tortoiseshell. Just whatever to kind of make it loose enough so that when you do flip it, there's not that much friction. But another thing, these were basically meant to be used floating. It wasn't really until Eddie that wanted it, to not be able to bend up. So a lot of the design, and setup and everything were made so that it would float, which is important because, at that point, I don't know too many guitar players that only wanted to dive and, so there's a lot of things like where the pivot points are on this one. On the early ones, the pivot fulcrum points are very high up onto the base plate, and then they move somewhat down.
You got one there?
Further you get in there.
Can you hold that up? You got one there?
I don't know if you can see it, but basically where the fulcrum points are.
Yes.
On the early ones are very, very almost no relief on the edge there.
Right.
And I have 2 broken saddles, which was very common with these because you'd over tighten them and they just snap off.
Right.
So
where were they manufactured? Those early ones in Seattle? I mean, was a machine shop somewhere up there?
Supposedly they were made in. Well, they said they're called garage made Floyds. There's a kind of, this isn't 100% confirmed, but supposedly they were made in Floyd's basement or his garage. Whether how the base plates and the saddles, it's kind of ambiguous, but supposedly they were USA made. In whether who else helped Floyd, we're not really sure. But
see you, Andrew. Good
okay,
to see you, sir.
So as far as the timeline goes on this, so were there any other people doing this? Was like Rockinger, had they started work? I mean, was Floyd the only game in town? What about Kaler and all these? Were they all later? They were much later.
Much later. So this is like 79, 80. So it's important. Okay, so rewind a little bit. So how Ed got his? So supposedly, well, Ed kind of knew Lynn Ellsworth knew Floyd. There's that. But what Randy Hansen told me is that Eddie was reading the Guitar Player magazine, and actually the very first Floyd article was in I forgot what year it was, sometime in 78. They actually showed Randy Hansen's Floyd Rose and did a big interview on it. And Ed saw that, and he went to go see Randy Hansen play at, I think it was the Whiskey. I'm not sure, but I think it was. This was in 78. If the dates are wrong, go on the website. I might be getting some of these exact dates wrong, but so anyway, yeah. So so he went there and he heard about it. He talked to Randy, and actually Randy Hansen, he talks about this. He interviews and talks about this all the time, but because I guess Eddie wanted to check out the FRT one, which is this one, right? This is like the first, I guess you could say the first Floyd right here, the FRT one, the Rose. It's the one with this sticker. All right. And they're in the backstage and Randy Hansen was showing him. And I guess he was just going crazy with it. He had it on the floor. He was kicking it with a whammy bar with his foot. And Randy Hansen had a strobe tuner and he hit it and it was perfectly in tune. And he said that Ed's eyes just like bulged out of his head. Like he couldn't believe it. and that's how it started. So after then, then that's when supposedly Ed connected with Floyd Linnell's probably after that time, and I don't know when how it unfolded then, but that's how it started. So, and that's how Ed started to get his FRT ones. Now, which brings to the next thing. So who else was doing it? So this is really interesting. So it's actually the Japanese. They were the first, Fernandez. So Fernandez in 1979. So Ed had it on this Bumblebee, right? In 79 on the Japan World Tour. Mm-hmm. That's probably when they seen it, and they took a lot of photos then. So Fernandez, they're notorious, and obviously in the Japan companies then of copying everything, right? And so this is now the Japanese stuff is tough because there's not a lot of firsthand accounts. This is what a guy told me. This guy who worked in sales in 1980 in Fernandez, I got a hold of him. I'm like, what happened with this? Supposedly, after seeing Ed in Japan with the Bumblebee and the FRT1, the Japanese are like, what is that? That's interesting. We gotta, clone that. And now Fernandez is notorious for making pretty good clones. Like they were the only company to really, like Randy Rhodes's Polka Dot V. They were the only company, like they allowed Fernandez to go take measurements of it. Same with like Brad Gillis's, his Strat with an FRT1 as well. But anyway, supposedly they acquired, after they seen Ed in Japan with his Bumblebee with the FRT1, they inquired, then as soon as they got one somehow in the United States, I don't know where, when, but they somehow acquired one. The United States brought it back, and they measured it and they cloned it. And what's funny is Floyd Rose has taken this idea to Gibson, Fender. He got denied by everyone.
Did he have a patent on it at that point or anything?
Yes, he had a patent at it. Yep. He had a patent, and he had a patent by then. It's kind of funny because it's really crazy to me how they denied him, because Eddie was already using it. He was marketing this in 79, 80 kind of. And this is when Eddie was using it on the Bumblebee. But even Gibson and Fender, they denied him. And supposedly this is what happened. And this is either 1980. I'm thinking it's the summer of 80 or possibly winter 81 NAMM show. And I've heard this from I heard this from a couple people, and supposedly I believe this is true. Fernandez made a clone of it, and at the NAMM show, I'm thinking it's the 1980 NAMM show, possibly, maybe 81, they showed Floyd Rose it, and I guess he was highly impressed. And he contracted with Fernandez to fabricate the Floyd Rose systems in Japan. This is before Kramer. And so Floyd Rose is he's
would want to sue them. I would have thought he would have wanted to sue them.
I think because no one else has taken interest in it. It's really crazy. Like he went to everyone and everyone turned them down. Fender, there's an article on the website of someone Fender. They told them it's like, this is ridiculous. We don't want to do anything with this, which is funny because actually when Kramer folded, Fender was the one who got distribution rights of it, which is kind of funny. Anyway, so in 1980, 81, so if you look in the 1982 Fernandez catalog, you can actually buy. Here it is. This is a Japanese Fernandez FRT1. Wow. It's like 94% accurate as the other one. You could actually, if you were in Japan, you could buy these in a brief moment of time. Okay. Wow. So here it is. It's actually really similar to the USA. Not exactly, but this is actually considered possibly the first production FRT1. The USA ones were like so few. And anyway, so
these ones were the first available on an actual production guitar. I mean, the ones that Floyd was making, you can order them, you can get them through Charvel. The one I got was ordered through Wayne Charvel and sent to him. But the Fernandez FRT1 was actually on production Fernandez guitars.
So let me ask you a question. So I don't know if I'm missing this part. Was Floyd involved in that particular one right there himself? He was he contracted with them for anything, or was that just purely Fernandez, that one?
This one is like what Darren said. It's just an exact copy of
so
of the USA ones.
The one that you could buy in Japan in like 1981. That had nothing to do with Floyd. That was just a Fernandez. That was theirs.
That was theirs with conjunction of Floyd. You mean,
Okay.
you know,
Okay,
they
he was
Yeah.
involved and
yeah.
okay.
He,
So
so-
I would have thought if not, he would have been like freaked out, like, oh my god.
Right.
no, they
I think
are
it was just
official
good timing.
Floyds. Yep.
Yeah.
It's
How
official Floyd. Mhm.
truly, how good is the tuning stability on that?
They're
And
pretty
when
good.
did when did locking tuners actually come into play?
That wasn't until
little bit
1982,
Yeah.
July
See, so-
1982.
So that would have been on just obviously having a good quality set of tuners, some showers or something of a heavy brass composition, a good rotation ratio, that would really matter. That would be a plus in keeping that in tune. Now,
Well, you still have the locking nut.
locking
You
the
still
nut,
have the-
though,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So
Okay.
back up. So yeah, I think you guys had questions on what they were. So the USA ones, if you were like if you were just so happened in like Seattle or like you bought a Charvel guitar in 1980, that's like the only time you ever really see these. These are super rare. The only time you see the Japanese ones, it was briefly. These are probably only made for maybe a couple months, and so these are like the most rare Floyds, probably these ones. The tuning stability. So you mentioned that they're actually really good. Brad Gillis only wants to play these still. They're really great high quality on these ones. They're really high quality. The locking nuts are also really good. The problem with these non-fine tuners is, when you clamp them,
Mm-hmm.
they twist, so they kind of go flat or sharp, once you lock them. But the early locking nuts were a little more higher tolerances, so like they didn't twist as much when you brought them down.
Right.
So that helped out.
That's the main issue was when they twist, and they don't have enough support behind the nut to keep it. I mean, the nut. If you look at the nut of a Floyd, it's radius to a 10-degree radius,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's also radius this way. So there's two radiuses going on. So you have the curvature of the strings going over it. So if you have a little bit of movement on that locking nut, it'll change the tuning. But then you also have the retaining nut, or the retaining bar, which helps too. So it's just kind of like Gillis and I think the Guthrie Govan, they still prefer non-fine tuning Floyds, and as long as your setup and your the way you're used to doing things is fine, they don't seem to have a problem.
Interesting.
So okay, so we're around like 80, 81 right now. So when did so Floyd and the Japanese and the Fernandez guys, they were doing it there. So when did they start farming it out to, like, was it Schaller in Germany and things like that? When did that all start?
Well, you're really jump starting. Yeah, that's about so Schaller's brought in probably like January, February, March 83. So probably January 83 is when they started. So basically when the Kramer contract hit, in like 83, that was when Schaller started. So all of this stuff is all before the Kramer contract. All this stuff is going down.
Kramer contract coincided with the fine tuners, and everything was kind of the perfect one. That was it, right? That was
really a little bit before.
Yeah, actually, the Fernandez Japan actually were involved in making the FRT4 fine tuners, supposedly based on research. Mm-hmm.
And how involved was Eddie really involved in those fine tuners? They said that was, a lot of people say that was one thing he brought to it. He said, Floyd, you need fine tuners on these things. Is that truthful, or is
few different stories with that?
So here there's
an interesting thing is the Petulette story.
Yeah. So before we get to the FRT4, before we get to fine tuners, I'll briefly mention the FRT3. So the next phase was FRT3, which was this one. It's just this is a Jap. So it's not like there's not, you can see it's like these are cast saddles now, fully cast. This is the next version. So the Japanese made these. By this time, the Japanese are sending Floyd a bunch of stuff, Fernandez, and a lot of the stuff is basically, a lot of it's all Japanese by then. Okay, so actually the very first ever Floyd Rose logo was actually made by the Japanese right here. This is the very first trim. These are the trims that had the very first Floyd Rose logo, FRT3s.
Oh my
And these trims are different than the Schaller ones, right? So this is the Schaller, Schaller. This is one that's on Kramer's, right? This is 80. This is their version of it. This is the Japanese one. These are started making these in 82. Okay, so big steel blocks on these. These ones had Floyd Rose made of hot rolled steel. And anyway, so they made this in about 82. They're pretty good quality. These are all they're all also very expensive.
And they weren't really that much different than the FRT ones. The only difference was that the saddles were cast, so they can make a lot more of them. They didn't have the little notch in there, so they're a little more stable when you crank down on them, so they didn't break as much.
Yeah.
So this was probably how Floyd would have wanted the original ones to be if he had enough of the tooling, or enough money and production value to get these going. It's probably how they would have been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also important to note that by this time, by like 82 sometime, Floyd Rose, like Fernandez was like supposedly shipping him stuff. Like, so a lot of stuff he was selling. If you actually went to Floyd's shop in Seattle, like sometime in 82, the garage made Floyd's I don't think he was really selling that many. He was probably selling what Fernandez was shipping him, because why would he be making these in his basement when he's hiring Fernandez to, make them for him? Because they got metal. One brief point is, here's a confusing thing when you got these vintage Floyd Rose. So when Fernandez Japan made the FRT1, their version, they also made, it's called the FRT2. This is not an official Floyd Rose product. It's basically a string through FRT1. And this is a Fernandez product. They put in it's a lower cost qual version of it. And I guess you could call it like the first ever licensed Floyd Rose ever, but it wasn't really licensed. But this is a Fernandez version. So the FRT2 was not an official Floyd Rose, but a lot of people, they'll say this is what Ed had. Yeah, but no, it's not. This is different.
On that note, let me ask you, Darren, licensed. Explain that out.
That didn't happen until 1985. So, when in 83, 84, everyone's kind of cloning it. And in 1985, that's when they started the licensing with everything. And so the licensing contract. And so you basically can make a Floyd copy, you just got to pay some money to Floyd, and they were okay with it. But until then, people are just, the Japanese too, everyone was making their own copies of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So by the time, the FRT3s were coming around, there was a lot of copies, being made by, a couple different manufacturers. So it was really smart of Floyd to license them out, because it's like, well, they're going to make them anyway. So this way, at least I'm somewhat having a say in the quality and how many they're making and where they're going. So it was a very good and lucrative idea.
Yeah. So relating to Ed had the FRT1 on a lot from that. So he had on the Bumblebee, he had on the Frankenstrat from like 80 till sometime in 81. He had it on.
Hey, Darren, did he take? I think we were talking about this a few weeks ago. He took the one off of the Bumblebee and put it on the Frank at some point. The same
no,
one?
not the one from the Bumblebee. No, the Frankenstrat had a different one. The Bumblebee's never seen again. That was the one without, it was rusted up.
Right.
He probably took it off. It's probably somewhere, but that one, I don't believe it's ever seen again, because he had a couple different FRT ones. I'd have to double check all the guitars, but he had it on the Rude guitar. He had it on the Circles on Chan guitar. He had it on a, I want to say like maybe 4 or 5. That was Ed used FRT1. That was his primary tremolo from 80 to 81. Well, even in 79 with the Bumblebee. This is the main trem he used on the Floyd stuff. He has never seen ever. Now he probably had some, but I have never seen Ed with an FRT3 ever. Did he have some? Probably. There's no photos of it, because he went from the FRT1 straight to the FRT4 in July 1982.
Just seemed to work for him, and it's important to note too that there were USA FRT3s as well. Even though some of the saddles on them were most likely made in Japan and sent over and put together by Floyd, but you could buy these from Floyd. just like you could buy the FRT ones. But like Darren said, the FRT twos were it seemed like they were just on their own to make those and make them available for their guitars.
Hey, Dwight.
So then, would you say like July of '82, Ed went to the two?
Yeah. So, yep, correct. So there's a story. So I forgot who asked the question, but who made the fine tuners? There's a very funny story that Ed tells.
Hey,
Supposedly, because Ed claims he made the fine tuners. He had the idea, and Ed supposedly he told Floyd to make this fine tuners trim because he kind of got sick because when he's clamping and it just slight went out of tune. It was kind of a hassle, even with the better locking nuts. Now there's an interview he gives where basically he tells us to Floyd, and Floyd gives him something that basically looks like the Fender fine nut clamping. So it looks like this. This is what Eddie supposedly said he got. So it's basically he could keep the FRT one on it, and you put this on the neck where the locking nut behind the locking nut, and these are actually fine tuners right here. You could fine tune these at the locking nut.
John, have you ever seen that before?
I never have.
I have never seen this ever, bro. I'm looking at something from outer space, brother. I didn't mean to stop you, brother. I'm sorry. I have never seen that before.
I got some theories on this. So this isn't what Ed had. Ed had something like this though. So here's what's really interesting. So Ed claimed he got something like this, and Ed's like, "What the hell is this?" I'm talking like finger tuners, like on a violin or something, or whatever he was saying. Now here's what's interesting. So let's say Floyd did develop this. Now here's what's really interesting. So once he signed the contract with Kramer, which is ESP, because a lot of the Kramers are built by ESP. Mm-hmm. ESP only available in Japan. You couldn't find these in the United States. But ESP, it was called the ESP Mighty Vice, and it had the same thing, just like this.
And they called it a Mighty Vice?
It was called the ESP Mighty Vice. Yeah, it was basically like a Les Paul Floyd, and like what Kramer put out for a little while in the 1985. But it had this at the locking nut. It had it like this. So you actually had a finger. These are like fine tune right here, which is kind of a pain.
Did it work?
But I never tried this yet. I haven't. I heard it works okay. And no, you see these. This is called the Fender fine tune lock nut. You find these on the 1983 Fender Elite Stratocasters.
Wow.
It was an option. So that's what this is from. Is from a Fender. Wow. So that was also 83. So this is what Ed is talking about in that interview. Something that looks like this.
Wow.
And he didn't like it. And supposedly what happened is Floyd Rose and Fernandez, they're working together. They're collaborating. The guy from Japan told me that they collaborated a lot, and they also designed some things. So it's like the way he's talking, it's not like maybe Floyd. It was also these guys from Japan designing some of this FRT4 stuff as well. Anyway, but Floyd Rose got in a bad car accident, I guess, or a motorcycle accident. So this is probably in 81. This is in like the summer of 1981. And Ed got in a car accident, so it was kind of delayed getting this thing rolling. A guy named David Petchelot, who made the mini Les Paul for Floyd Rose, he actually developed he considers it the very first ever locking nut with fine tuners, like a tremolo with fine tuners. It was pretty rough, and he marketed it to Floyd Rose, and that's kind of how it started. So he supposedly made a contract with Eddie and said, "Hey, let's design this," and because he gave Ed the mini Les Pauls, mm-hmm. and he said, "Let's do this," and Ed said, "Yes, let's do this. This is great." So David Petchelot, he supposedly I got this article on the website somewhere. You can check it out later. But he didn't hear back. And then this is the most important NAMM show in the history of guitars, the 1982 NAMM show. So Rockinger falls into place right here too. So at this time, between the summer of 81 and 1982, Dennis Berardi, he won Eddie Van Halen over with the Rockinger, and he talked Eddie to be, with Kramer guitars, right? So this is important. And now this is Floyd Rose with Fernandez still, right? And Eddie signed the contract with Kramer guitars because he liked the Rockinger, and that's kind of how, this is the Rockinger has been built sometime in '82, right?
Where did they come from, Rockinger? Where did they even come from?
Germany.
So they would, so they saw what was going on with Floyd and Fernandez and everything like that, and then they decided to do their own, I guess.
Yeah, so they were also making their own version of the fine tuner. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They were making trims for Les Pauls as well. I think they were in the hardware business, and then they saw that there was availability to make some trims with fine tuners.
So Ed agreed to that.
What was that?
So Ed agreed to the Rockingers.
It was called the Edward Van Halen Tremolo. There was, there's publications.
It wasn't right away. So I think once he signed the Kramer contract, then they marketed it as Edward Van Halen Tremolo. But, like in Dennis Berardi's interview, that's what he says. He's like, hey, we got this new thing called the Rockinger. It's got fine tuners. You're gonna like it. And Eddie did like it. Now what we don't know is what happened with Floyd Rose and Eddie, because obviously Ed was using the Floyd, he's using the FRT ones, and he had a love-hate relationship with it, you know what I mean, in a few ways. And I'm not sure how it all panned out, but Eddie's, he's like, he agreed to the Kramer contract. This is the craziest NAMS. I don't think anyone knows this. I know because I talked to some of these crazy guys. Okay, the 1982 NAMS show. Eddie Van Halen, right? Ed's at the Kramer booth, marketing for the Rockinger Tremolo, right? That was a big thing. It's a huge thing. It's like, whoa, Eddie's with Kramer now. This is huge, right? Because he wasn't really signed before then. So David Petrulat, who talked to Eddie, he's the guy who made the mini Les Paul, and he said they had this idea for this, fine tuning tremolo, which actually supposedly took like an FRT1 base plate to make, which is kind of ironic and funny. Eddie actually had like an FRT1 base plate, and he gave it to David Petrulat to kind of make. It's really funny.
And didn't he use a Gibson tailpiece with the fine tuners on it?
Yeah, exactly. So there's photos of this. Yeah. There's photos on the website. Check out the Petrulat article. Anyway, so Petrulat's like, what's going on? I haven't heard from Eddie in forever, and I heard he's going to be at the NAMS show in Atlanta, Georgia, 1982. So David Petrulat, I guess, goes to the NAMS show because he wants to talk to Eddie. It's like, hey, man, what's up with the fine tuning thing? I thought we were going to do something with that. Petrulat shows up. He sees Eddie at the Kramer booth with the Rockinger, and he's like, what's the deal, man? Like this. And Eddie's like, oh, hey, man, it is what it is. I had this deal come up, et cetera, et cetera. So like Petrulat's like, well, I guess that's it. And because he's with Kramer and the Rockinger, but it gets even better. Okay. So Floyd Rose is also at the 1982 NAMS show in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Fernandez booth. He's at another booth, marketing whatever, with the Japanese Fernandez with his FRT3s, and maybe I think he had possibly had a FRT4 prototype at that time. Supposedly, this is just what I heard. Floyd Rose is at the Fernandez booth. He walks over to the Kramer booth, talks to Ed or Dennis Berardi, and he's like, hey, I got a better trem than that. I got a better one. It's in the process. It's being made right now. This is June 1982, okay? June 1982 at the Atlanta NAMM show. So he walks from the Fernandez booth, talks to Kramer, and whoever he's talking to, Ed, and he supposedly convinces them, and so he must impress them because a month later, Eddie is seen with the very first FRT4 prototype on tour in July 1982. So that's it. Wow. So it's crazy.
Do you have an FRT4 right there you could show us?
Yeah. Yep. Mike has the one that just that just is like Eddie's except chrome, and the one I got. So here's the FRT4. So this is the one. This is one of the prototypes. This is the version 2 prototype. So this one is vertical fine tuners, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So it's vertical, straight up and down. This particular one is milled and has milled saddles, is what this one looks like. Mike, do you got yours? So
Yeah.
Mike has the one that what Ed's. This is what KK Downing had of Judas Priest. The one Mike has is like more like Ed's. So his is cast, and the sustain block is one piece to the base plate. It's very unique, and it's really similar. That's just like Ed's pretty much, except Ed's was gold plated. Mike's is chrome plated.
So that's fully cast in one piece. The
The
block.
base plate and the block is, I don't know if it was cast in one piece, but there's definitely brazing on here so that it was
Okay.
the silver soldered on it. But,
Okay.
you know, it wasn't made like, I mean, the 70s Fender Strat
What
trims
kind of weight
are
does
one
that
piece.
have? Has that got a lot of weight to it?
Not as heavy as, you know, a normal trim. It's not any heavier or lighter, really.
So you think Floyd had a prototype of that at that 82 NAMM show of the FRT4?
It's hard to say. It's hard to get photos of that. It kind of looks a little different. By that time, he probably did. Yeah, he probably had it because the patent was filed in March 1982. So yes, he probably did have one by then. Yeah.
So you said July of '82 is. Do you know when in that month? Exactly.
This is a Donnie Ward question.
Yeah, when did the tour start? The Diver Down tour?
Yeah, I was on the Diver Down tour. I want to say it's July, mid-July for sure, I think.
Reason I ask is I saw him mid-July, July 16, '82.
Yeah,
here in
that's
North Carolina.
that's when he had the Kramer Pacer neck on it, and with the sanded logo was sanded off. That's when he had the gold FRT4 on it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Donnie did mention that on the show that night, and I think he did mention in July that, because I guess Ed, that's when he kind of he must have put it on maybe himself. And did he botch is that when he botched the intonation up on the Frankie really bad?
No.
No,
I don't think. I'm not sure. I don't think he put it on himself. He could. I guess he could have. I don't really know. All I know is that was the first time it's shown. I mean, he might have just used a post from the FRT1 and threw it on.
Yeah.
The one Mike has like the one Ed. That's more USA measurements. This one's Japanese made. It's got, so this one is Japanese made. Is what it points to, and this is what KK Downing had. So the Fernandez must have collaborated with Floyd, and so this is Japanese in origin. And the FRT4 is probably possibly designed with Japan as well with that. And so Ed played that until like November, December 1982. Then he put a prototype FRT5. But also worth mentioning, notice if you are so the very first ever production guitars with a fine tuning Floyd Rose, where it was actually Fernandez, and they look like this. They have these are real production with an FRT with an embossed logo right on here.
Yeah.
This is a production FRT4. So the difference, these ones kind of go out a little bit and then go up. So Ed was kind of complaining about, because he was hitting his hands against it. Mm-hmm. And so you could tell the Japanese kind of figured that out, and they kind of moved it back just a little bit, but it wasn't enough. If you are a very lucky person, and so these are only available for like 4 months. This is pre-Kramer. This is like late 1982. They're super expensive. They cost like $400 back in late 82. Now the best, if you were, again, only in Japan, this is called the Fernandez ST135, fully complete with a FRT4. If you were in Japan in late 1982 and you wanted the Super Strat, this is the best. This thing is mind-blowingly expensive, and it was also very good ebony fretboards. So these were the Super Strats they made. And it was right around this time that the Floyd Rose contract, he signed with Kramer, and then they're like, what's going on? So yeah, but these are so hard to find because they barely made them. The FRT4s are like super rare because, for one, you can only get them in Japan. 2, people took them off these guitars and they'd part them out, so it's like really hard to find these complete. And so I collect this. So when I seen this guitar complete, I had to have it. So That's a little fun fact. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? At the same time that Floyd Rose took off in 81, 82, Rockinger was still on the market. They were still selling guitars. Some guys liked the Rockinger.
Yep.
What's the big difference, and why was the Floyd at that NAMM show better? Was it because they both had fine
Everything.
tuners? Correct.
Everything was better about it.
Everything. Just
If
everything.
you look at how the Rockinger works on these two little posts, you wonder how is it not breaking every time you bend down on it. It's just a very, very poor way of doing what Floyd was already doing, basically.
Can you feel it in the trim when you dump the bar?
I mean, I've only played one or two of them, and I didn't want to go any further down than I could because it felt like it was just going to break it. Yeah.
So after the NAMM show, Ed was probably Berardi, or either if they were both on board with it, or Ed was pressuring him, saying, "You got to get out of this deal. You got to get out of this deal." I'm sure something like that must have went down. And I just want to point out one thing. Donnie's in the chat. Chili Beef. Donnie says, "Donnie here. The gold FRT4 is on for all of the 1982, all the way up to the end when he puts the Whale Tail Proto on. So all of the 1982 tour, that is." Donnie's in there. Chili Beef. What's up, Don? So
What's up, Donnie?
yeah. So I guess I'm sure they had to go through some legal hurdles to get out of that deal with Rockinger. I imagine, right?
Yeah, something. I don't know exactly how the deal went out, but I know Ed got mad at the guys at Rockinger at one point, and once he had the FRT4, I guess he could see it was better. The problem with the Rockinger, well, for one, there's actually two versions of the Rockinger. The first version was made out of brass, so it's really soft, and I guess the knife edge just when you whammy bar over time would kind of wear down and slide around, and it was also not double locking. They actually, by the time they fixed it,
behind the nut. It was behind the nut locking, which, if you have a string going over the nut, it kind of defeats the purpose of having a locking nut, because you still, get binding in there and everything. So it was just not a very well. I was even surprised that Eddie really, signed off on it and was trying to do that, because he knew Floyd was going around, and and he knew there was better trims out there. And I think at that time I heard that there was some problems with Floyd and Eddie, and there might have been some legal stuff going on about the fine tuners. So they might have not been on the best terms, or at least their lawyers weren't. So I think Eddie at that point was trying to look for something that he can have his hands on and develop. And because, it was kind of like, okay, guys, let's get this going. I want to, it's almost there. And at that point too, other companies were saying, hey, Eddie's looking to endorse stuff, or it's the first time really Eddie's kind of been wanting to put his name on stuff. So there was kind of a rush to get everybody involved with Eddie that that they could. So everybody was coming at him at the same time.
So because of the time frame, Ed never really ever played that Rockinger live, because the tour didn't start till July. So is there any even photos really? I don't know. Is there photos?
It was on the double neck, I believe. It was on the double neck.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the purple pacer, Pacer, he's striped with Alan Holdsworth. Yeah, it's on there.
Your guitar there, Tony, right? The one you're doing, the multicolored striped one. Okay.
Yeah.
But that was pretty much. It didn't go any farther than that, I guess, at that point, right? And you mentioned, you touched on it a second ago. So I wonder what Eddie's relationship with Floyd was. I guess it was. At times it was probably contentious. I can imagine, it's a business, I guess. And I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I reading in one of a guitar magazine or something back then, that Eddie was kind of pissed at Floyd, and he brought it up there because he just asked for a few units for testing or something like that. He said in the article, and Floyd wouldn't send him any units. So, and this had to be like around 1990 and 91, that far, that much later. And Eddie brought it up it was a Guitar World interview or something like that, saying, I asked him for a few models for, he wouldn't even send me any of them like that. So
was that when he was going to Ernie Ball?
Yeah, I think that was.
Well, at that time, Fender was having the distribution with Floyd's. So I think that was the main problem, was the Fender connection now.
That's why you don't see the Floyd's on them. Yeah.
So Ed's first Ernie Ball, I think this was on, the other day. But Ed's first Ernie Ball Music Man's had real Floyds on them, because that's what they wanted to use. That's what he was using, and it just makes sense. So Fender at that time had the distribution rights and everything, and I guess they said no to that. This is what I've heard and what kind of makes sense.
That's what I heard too. That they didn't allow Ernie Ball to use Floyd's out or something like that. Yeah, that's what I heard.
So speaking of the Ernie Ball, so they went with the Godo ones, I guess the licensed ones, right? I actually love those because I love the way they tilted back the fine tuners on that. I mean, I don't know if that was
Godo's good. Well, Godo probably made these early Floyds. So like Fernandez there is a marketing company. They probably hired Godo and Takeuchi. Like Godo and Takeuchi actually probably made these pre-Kramer Floyds. Yeah.
Pretty wild.
I mean, and also with Fernandez, there was ESPs, could have been involved with it. Like I said, Fernandez was just a marketing company. So they weren't actually having factories, under their own name making them. They were sending them out just like Floyd is doing with Schaller. So there could have been a multitude of different trims being made at one factory for different guitar companies, and Godo might have been one of them. I think there was
there's Takeuchi. There's a factory in Kyoto, Japan.
Japan and Korea.
Yeah, before that. But yeah, it's funny because the Godo, from Japan, and they probably made some of the early pre-Kramer Floyds. It's kind of crazy.
It's crazy that it's such a small little world, and they all doing ESP and Godo, and it's pretty wild when now you look back and say, oh, it's the same players. You know what I mean? It's the same 4 or 5 players that are involved in this whole.
Well, yeah, it makes sense too, because at the time Kramer was using Godo tuners. They were using Godo pickups. It would make sense that Godo might have something to do with that. But then when they switched to, well, that's the thing with ESP too. ESP and Kramer, obviously, they were making the necks and some bodies later on. So and then when they switched to Schaller, it seemed like everything went to Schaller. Now they're using Schaller tuners, using Schaller pickups, using Floyd Rose made by Schaller. So they're getting all their hardware from one place and then assembling differently. So
okay, so
it seems like it kind of becomes a package deal.
So we're kind of in that time frame now, because that's this is the time period where they kind of started to go with Schaller, correct?
Yeah, and at this time, I want to say too is that up until the FRT4, the Fernandez made FRT4 and FRT5, which we didn't talk about, but the FRT5s are a different unit, but they were still making the FRT2s and the FRT3s. In fact, the FRT3, I think, was one of the longest ones they were making for.
They made it until 85, yeah.
Yeah.
So the official. So as the next thing we're going to talk about now, as we're going to the FRT5s, it's so you got to know, Floyd Rose was still contracted with Fernandez while he was with Kramer. So very, very important to know. It's kind of another crazy story. So there's official Floyd's FRT5s in Japan and in Kramer, when they're selling them.
Wow.
And I have a couple of magazine clippings that have, Floyd Rose, ESP, Kramer, and then Schaller with FRT5 Fernandez made parts on it too. So there's a whole weird thing going on when the actual FRT5 starts getting made, and
a lot of this is
who was making it, and like a lot of this is just what we can gather and put together from ads and
a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So you can, if you go to all these Japanese magazines and ads, you find this everywhere. There's this guy named his name's John Lovestead. Actually, if you go to the website, all like the Japanese like catalog information I got from this guy. He's a Japanese guitar collector somewhere in Europe, and he's got like literally thousands and thousands of Japanese magazines, and he sends me all this stuff. So all that Japanese, but a lot of this stuff came from him, and it's mind blowing because you'd never find it otherwise. Like all this Floyd Rose with evidence of like Floyd Rose at the Fernandez booth in 1982 and Floyd Rose here, but Floyd never talks about it. You just don't know. It's just crazy. I mean, like they made a Bumblebee copy with an FRT1. I mean, like in 1980, late 81, Fernandez made a Bumblebee copy with an FRT1 on it already. I mean, but you can get it, but then by that time the Chevelle made, they were suing everyone, and so they stopped. And they also made a Frankenstrat copy with an FRT4 on it in Japan by Fernandez. They could get
kind of anything goes. Yeah, it was kind of anything goes.
Yeah, it was like
wasn't very well monitored.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure it was all pissing Eddie off to no end when he started seeing all that stuff going
Well,
on.
then you get to the whole Grover Jackson beef color scheme thing, and then you see that, yeah.
Right. So we're up to the FRT5 now, basically.
FRT5 is the next one, and that's,
It's even more
everybody's
crazy.
favorite. Yeah, it's even more crazy because now you have Fernandez, you have the new guy in town now, Hanson Metal Corp. You have Schaller getting involved, and maybe even ESP.
That's a little, we'll surprise. We'll start easy on them, I guess. But so a lot of this FRT5 stuff, it gets a little interesting. So the very first, the prototype FRT5 one is seen on the Kramer Ag guitar, the one that Ed took with him in the South American tour. And that's like it was first seen on the Rasta guitar. Actually, before that, it was on the Circles guitar, which is the Unchained guitar, repainted to the Rasta. And then Eddie put the very first prototype, what we've seen anyway, on the Rasta guitar. Okay. Then he takes that prototype Floyd and he puts it on the Kramer Ad guitar. Okay. That's like the first prototype FRT5 ever seen. And possibly Japanese Floyd origin is what it looks like. The next prototype you see, this is actually recent evidence. Donnie and Dimitri, they kind of found this one. This is like, we only figured this out like 8 months ago, maybe. The first ever, it was on the Frankenstrat in I think November, December 1982, the very first one. And this is the second prototype seen. This is before the Hanson Metalworks whale tail that everyone knows about. Now it looks to be Japanese in origin. The saddles are identical. Okay. The saddles on Ed's prototype FRT5 on the Frankenstrat in December 1982 are the exact same saddles as this version of the prototype FRT4. So these saddles are the ones that Ed has on that one. They're a little thinner. There's a little more room in between each saddle. And these are Japanese in origin. The Fernandez made these saddles. These are Japanese in origin. And Mike, so yeah, these saddles are on the Frankenstrat in the first prototype, but the base plate's different. The base plate is like an FRT5 base plate. It's actually, Mike, you got yours? The one I actually traded you for this one, that FRT5? So, oh no, the one.
Which one?
No logo base plate. Name saddles, yeah.
Oh, well, these are the saddles. I put them on a 7.
Oh, got it. Okay.
But these saddles right here are the same.
Yeah. So anyway, Ed had a no logo base plate with those saddles I just showed you. That was on the Frankenstrat, and that one looks to be Japanese Fernandez in origin. So we know that Fernandez Japan had a role in this.
Before you go any further, so talk to me about that Hanson Metalworks a little bit. What was that, and who was that, and when did that come into?
That's a fun one.
Yeah. So
basically replaced APM, which was American Precision Metalworks, and Gary Kaler, which is who we thought were making them, because at that time that's kind of what we had heard, or Darren had talked to somebody. I don't really remember.
Yeah. It was false information. So it was really thought it was American Precision Metalworks, which is like Gary Kaler Prius. It was false information because I think like Brassworks, people were involved in Brassworks, and maybe Brassworks knew someone. It just shows how fast false information spreads. And like on the whale tail fine tuners, the Hanson, they kind of have like an APM. It's got the diamond shape thing. So people thought, okay, we can see that. But no, people got it messed up. So the people got it mixed up. Gary Kaler did actually make the Floyd Rose Pros. He won the lawsuit against Floyd Rose, and he made the Floyd Rose Pros in like 1988 for like the Kramer Pro Wax, and so they got it mixed up. So like if you look at the bottom of the Kramer Floyd Rose Pros, it says APM on them. So these people were just getting from way back in. I think they just got mixed up. But no, APM had nothing to do with the whale tails. It was a guy named Hanson Metalworks.
Different
Michael
Hansen, not Randy Hansen, different Hansen.
Not Randy Hansen, no relation. Yeah, just
Mhm.
right, same place, same time.
Now, really quick. So Gary Kaler, I mean, obviously he went on, had his own company with Kaler. What do you guys think of the Kalers?
I honestly don't have any previous, experience with them. To be honest with you, I might have set up, worked on a couple of them, but I've just always been a Floyd guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have one. I have one of those Davies N4s, the Washburn. That's what they came with, and I kind of liked it. I never replaced it with a Floyd. I left it on there, and it's. I thought it was pretty cool. I don't know if anybody else has them on there, but they're pretty. I thought they're pretty good.
Yeah, they have their place. I got them. I have a few. They have a few advantages, and some of them you can put them on a base, and they work well on the base. You can actually have a floating trim on a base, and it works on a Floyd. The spring tension. They got a pros and cons. Obviously it's easier to install one. They're just really different. I got one on that Megazone. Carl, it's actually the only other Megazone known besides that's like made by Carl Sandoval that exists with a Dan Electro neck, and that unfortunately had a Kaler put on it, but it does play better with it on, so it is what it is.
That's pretty cool.
I see more people disappointed when there's a Kaler put on it than a Floyd.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing is, like Jackson, they kind of had a lot on there. Like back then, I mean, it worked. They were easy to put on, and they got the job done. When they're set up right, they're fine.
Right.
I don't like the behind the lot. I always think a locking nut where it's at, like a Floyd's better. I don't like the behind the nut locks because to me there's still a little bit of friction at the nut, so but it's okay. I mean, sometimes you gotta do that.
Right. So, okay. Tony, is that you?
Do any trivia?
Is it time for trivia, Tony? You want to break in?
Oh, is it?
I don't know. I hear the music. Do you guys hear the music?
Are we hearing something?
I'm hearing something.
I hear
Hearing
a bird,
trivia
I hear a
music.
bird. I was gonna get some tea, but we can do trivia if you like.
Throw it out there. Let's get that. And then we'll pick
All
up
right.
at that part.
Then we'll start with the fives. Yeah.
All right, kids, some Van Halen trivia for a David Lee Roth Edelman Smile Pass.
Love it.
Are those still good?
Yeah,
If he's playing.
hadn't been peeled yet. So we gave away a pink one last week. Let's give away a blue one tonight. It is a hard question, but they always prove me wrong. Right there.
There you go.
Thank you, Sandra. We are going to roll some Van Halen trivia. If you are the winner, there's an email address down below. Trivia winners email. Email me your stuff. I'll mail you that David Lee Roth pass tomorrow morning. And you might get it the day after that. Or you might not. Might be a couple of days. All right. Have I shown you guys this, Charles and John?
Nope.
I showed them this. All right, get ready to type Van Halen trivia, May 25th, 2022, coming at you.
Good luck,
Now.
you guys.
All right.
Let's see.
Before a show in Boston on the 93 Right Here, Right Now tour, what did Eddie find lodged in one of his ears before the show? What do you think? Before a show in Boston on the 93 tour, he found something lodged in his ear. What was it?
I remember this. It was like a national news story.
This hit the papers.
It did. It was in USA Today. I remember.
It was big news. It was big news.
Yeah, it was.
No hints for you tonight.
Dave's ego.
Good one.
Yeah, it's good to see you, bro.
Wax.
You guys are cold as ice. You guys are. Come back to the ballpark. Come back. It's a one-run game. Come on now.
Wow.
Come
Are
back.
we playing hot or cold? Getting cold?
No, it was not Valerie's tongue, Christopher.
They are all good answers, and I'm seeing a lot of them. Thank you for your answers. Get more creative, you know? I mean,
What was the question again?
all right, let's find it.
What was in his ear? A string.
I think they're not gonna get it tonight, and I think I'm gonna get to keep
Oh, is that what happened?
my blue David Lee Roth pass.
If nobody
Yeah.
get, oh,
Nobody gets it, it stays home. I'll give them one hint. Let me go back to the question. In this question, I took one word out of the question before the show. One word. All right. Soap and a waffle and cocaine and a leech.
they're getting desperate.
Wow.
Don't forget the French fry.
Going to the chat. M&M's, a bean, a string, a peanut. Right on.
I vote for Dave's ego. That was a good one.
That was a good
Awesome.
one. But not creative enough yet. Come on, kids. All right. We'll give you time to ponder. I'll keep an eye on the chat. Yeah.
All right. So, Tony will keep an eye on that, and we'll pick up where we left off. So we're up
Yeah.
to the FRT5. So take it away, fellas.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a bunch of different stuff too. Like, you know, with the not just the trims, but the posts and the locking nuts, differences in that. But you know, the main differences are the trims, and the FRT5s are next, and these are my favorites. You know.
Yeah, so there's before the Schaller, before the Schaller Kramer, there's basically two of them. It's the Hanson Metalworks one, and Fernandez made it's called the Fernandez FRT5 embossed, which is identical. So they were probably made about the same time. Yeah, so like what Mike has, they're identical to the production
Hey, Mike, can you
FRT4.
show a side view of that so we can see the sweep. Yeah, from the side.
Yeah, so this is basically the the whale tail
There
that
you
comes
go.
up and gets the fine tuners out of the way, out of the hands.
Yep.
But everything else is identical to the FRT4.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
all they did was one little design change, and then voila, you have basically what you now know as the Floyd Rose that everybody's been using for almost 40 years.
Yeah, the one Mike has, it was made maybe only for like a month or two. It's a really
That's the embossed
brief,
logo.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there was it's basically the FRT4 embossed logo that I showed earlier. It's just like in the FRT5 design. Supposedly when they signed with Kramer, Yeah. They're made out of
Wow.
cast. And speaking of which, it's important to know all the blocks, sustained blocks, are made out of hot rolled steel. These ones that Mike has. Supposedly, when Floyd Rose signed the Kramer contract, he did not tell Fernandez, and they're like, "What the hell is going on?" But they're still contracted with him, and so they quickly redesigned the FRT4 and made the one that Mike did, just showed you. And that was, some people said that was actually the first ever like production FRT5 design made, but I think it was made at the same time as the Hansen Metalworks Whaletail. I think.
So now we're still into 82, early 83, right? I mean,
yeah.
Mike Hansen said he showed plans to the FRT5, and I think it was still 82, wasn't it?
September or November, yeah. So
late 82.
September 1982, I think. So like Floyd gave Hansen the blueprints, which are all in millimeters, by the way. So you kind of know like the Japanese are probably involved with it somehow, right?
Or he knew that they were probably going to be made over there, so
yeah,
it would be easier for them. Whether it was Schaller or Fernandez, we don't know, but
true. And so this was a September, November 1982, where they gave Hansen the blueprints for it, and they probably started production, the Hansen Metalwork. So the one, the main one Ed had at this time, that he's going to put on his Frankenstratton 5150. They probably started production like. It's hard to get the exact month and dates. It's first seen on Ed in April 1983 in the Brian May sessions. So I think they produced them in like January or February 1983. That's what I think.
And those ones are basically just placeholders until Schaller can get up running and making their cast molds and which was very soon after. I mean, there wasn't that much of just a few months, I would think, between the USA Hansen Machine Corp whale tails and the Schaller ones. But what's weird is the Fernandez FRT5, because they obviously tooled up and did a really nice. This is actually one of my favorites. Besides the whale tail, this is my favorite.
That's a good one.
Because it's just so well made. It's really nice. It's hard to tell on the screen, but the really high quality trims and just the thick base plate. They still have the T blocks, which is what holds the strings in instead of just the regular blocks. But it's just a really good looking trim. And I don't know why Floyd didn't continue with them. I think it was probably because he was with Kramer now, and Kramer had a deal with Schaller. There was a story of, Berardi going to Schaller and basically saying, you can make these. We need to make 100,000 of these, or whatever it was. And Schaller was saying, you're not going to sell more than 1,000 of these. And he didn't really have any faith in them. And then that whole story. But I don't know why Fernandez did not continue making these.
Yeah, we don't know the reason. Yeah,
Kramer deal just had to be because of Kramer.
It's the Kramer deal, and Kramer had ESP make all the stuff, and that their competition with Fernandez, so that might have had something to do with it. But we don't know the whole story of why exactly Floyd left Fernandez making it. But my guess had something to do with the ESP Kramer deal. But we still don't know until today. We don't know.
And people are still guessing, aren't they?
Yeah, there's a lot of theories, but I
meant with the trivia question, but.
So the Hansen Metalworks whale tail. So now this one, it's a little thinner base. So this one's made out of bent steel. So for those of you watching, sometimes we get too technical, and I forget there's some people maybe don't understand this. So casting is like you're pouring, kind of like pouring the metal, right? Whereas bent steel is you get up plate and you're you can literally see the bend marks on this. This is what I had on this 5150. It's really roughly, crudely made in a way. You can see the bend marks everywhere on it. This one now, what's different about this one than the Japanese one? So the Japanese had a hot rolled sustained block. This one is cold rolled sustained block. It's a little crisper edges on it. It's a 1/2 inch. It's also really good. And so it had the brass fine tuners. There's no finger
Right,
speakers
yeah.
on here. And they
Which seemed to be another. Sorry, but it seemed to be another kind of Fernandez idea was to have those. You know, it seemed like they had a lot of input on the designs of these.
Yep. So that, and when we say Fernandez, these are like unknown Japanese metal workers. That's what we're saying. Like Fernandez didn't do this. They hired out these metal workers in Japan to figure this stuff out. It's kind of what we're talking about.
Mhm.
But anyway, so Ed used the whale tail, right? So this is what people known as the whale tail. It's the Hansen Metalworks. This is the most sought after one right here. They made about 800 of these. They used to think it was about 200 to 300, and the reason why they thought that is because they looked at the serial numbers on Kramer Pacers B-plate serial numbers, and people in the old Kramer forums said this is the earliest one and the latest one. That's why they thought it was about 300. But according to multiple sources, one of them being Lynn Ellsworth and someone else, they made about 800 of them approximately.
Yeah, that was from Lynn and Mike both saying that. Yeah.
And this was again.
But now whether they,
I
was gonna say whether they all made them on guitars. I've heard of some people, buying them, because Kramer was also the distributor of them too. So they didn't just put them on guitars. If you wanted to order one, you could sell them too. So we don't know how many there was actually put on guitars or sold later on. Maybe when the Shallers came in, they stopped using them and, either stored them or who knows what they did with them. But
yeah. And it was probably Ed's favorite, trim. So he had the whale tail on, the 5150 and the Frankenstrat for a while. And,
so he got them. He got probably two around the same time. And the 5150 was probably just being built around that time, early 83. And that probably went on it originally. And then he obviously changed it onto the Frankie around the same time, I would imagine, too, on both of those. And it stayed on the 5150 and it's still on there to this day, apparently, correct?
Yep.
And the Frankie, though, didn't he change it to just a regular production one?
And mid 90s, so 96, 97, I think. Yeah, right around there, I think. I have to double check. I don't quote me. I have to look at the website. Right. But that
might have been right around when Anderson made the neck for Frankie. I'm not sure.
FRT5, that's like the pinnacle, and from there, that's what we have nowadays. Basically, just
Yeah. So the FRT5 now, Floyd, he had there's other designs. So the FRT5 is basically like the finalized version. It's just important to know there's other variants, going on at this time. But he had a speed loader and then he had a Pro. He's got other lower cost models, but the Floyd Rose original, right? That's basically the FRT5. So the FRT, when we say FRT 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's like the Japanese designation, actually.
FRT is obviously Floyd Rose.
I gotta be careful, what I say, but I don't think Floyd Rose today likes those designations, I guess I should say, because they Kramer never used that. Kramer they just call it the original. You know what I mean? They didn't call it FRT5. That was a Japanese thing, but that's what the label. Every time there was a new model designation, that's what they called. Anyways, so the Hansen Metalworks, that's probably the most well-known one, because this is the Hansen Metalworks one was the one that's most well-known, even way back when people knew this one. They didn't really know about the FRT 1s and 4s. People didn't even know they existed, seriously. So what happened is, Hansen Metalworks made, he cranked these out. You can see these are made out of bent steel. These are just like a rush production, because Kramer Guitars, they signed with Eddie and they're like, we need these things ASAP. But Schaller in Germany, they weren't tooled up in time. They couldn't make it in time, but they had to get them to make it. So Floyd, Hansen, he's in the Seattle area too, I think. And he's like, look, you got to make these. I need them as soon as possible. We got to put them on Kramer Guitars. So it's just a short production. And so that's why you don't see them. But in approximately, so while Schaller was tooling up, this was throughout the fall, during the summertime, and then supposedly the first time you see it is on later B-plate serial number Kramers. So the first Schallers you see are in approximately summer 1983, and like August 1983 is kind of where you first see them. And now these are really great trims. Okay, so the very first, so this is what you see known today. Like this is what every Kramer had. Kramer had almost all the Marshaller Germany. So these first ones had this made in West Germany sticker on them, and the patent stamp was not on them. Yeah, that wasn't until 1985. And these 1983 ones are actually really rare too. They're only made in chrome and super high quality. The base plates on the 1983 and 84 Schaller ones are actually got a thicker base plate than the 1985 ones and later. So these are really cool. These are my favorite German Schaller ones. These are a little more fine-tuned as well. So in Germany, Schaller, they're a little more clean, a little more fine-tuned, a little more higher precision, similar to the Japanese-made ones.
They also use a steel insert block for the string instead of, well, I guess they're all steel, but these were just unplated. They weren't black or anything. So that's
they're
one way to look at it.
Yep.
And there were still a few appointments that were very similar to the previous whale tail, but by now everything's changed. You got the arm bars now, the screw-in type, which you've seen on Fernandez made Floyd's too. So it's not really, I don't know if this is a Schaller design or not. I think it's a Fernandez design.
It's just a lot. And and those are, I like, and Eddie still prefers those. Even he's always preferred
the old stuff.
Eddie has never liked the original Schaller. He's always played the old school trem bar. The one
this thing is so loose on Eddie's. I mean, I've heard stories where you bend this down, almost all the way, and it's still loose and doesn't do anything. I think Sammy has said that. And,
there's your winner.
We got
There's your winner. All right, so
you guys, Holly. Well done, sweetheart.
You guys were so all around it. You listed every bug in the world, which I appreciate. Let me tell you,
that's the most effort I've seen out of the chat to get something right. I think ever. Ever. That's crazy.
Every bug in the ground.
My goodness.
Up here. Yeah, but nobody said June bug. So I put the key word back in there. And I gave you the hint at first when I said that everybody was ice cold, all of you. That should have been hint number one, but June
it was a summer outside show.
Yeah. Yeah, and he I guess it got in there at sound check. And he found it in his ear and lodged it out before the show. Yeah. So, Holly.
Awesome.
Thank you. You are
good job, Holly.
The winner. Now let me say this. There was one name in the chat. Who was the one who was wanting a pass? There was somebody that said, Keith, what's the answer? Who was that? I'm going to send you a pass too. So type me something in the chat, dude. And thanks for being here. All right.
So
yeah.
So that was that's the Holy Grail, the FRT5. So what is different about the production models there going forward? I mean, obviously the base plate looks bigger on the FRT5 and it's a little more squared off. I mean, this is like a mid 80s one. I mean, I butchered it up a little bit, but the plate is a little more rounded, I guess, in the corners there and things like it. The other one looks bigger for sure. Am I right about that?
Then the whale tail or
this one looks, the whale tail looks bigger. The base plate on that, I guess, right?
It's not that it's bigger. It's just there's every little piece on the whale tail is slightly different than a production Floyd like yours. I mean, you can look at it side by side, and some people will say, well, it looks exactly the same. But every little thing on it is a little bit different. So, I mean, things like the logo is a little bit off to the side from where the center line is on the post. The saddles are notched for T-blocks. They're a little bit different. The fine tuners are brass, unplated brass with a diamond knurl. I mean, every little thing is just a little bit different, but it essentially looks exactly the same, right?
Right.
It's funny, right? And then when you get to the Schaller, you know, the first year Schallers didn't have "Made in Germany" on them, a stamp underneath. They had a little sticker, which could easily come off. There was no patent stamp on them. They used unplated blocks on them. Still stainless steel trim arms, which was left over from all the previous ones. But then once you get to 1984, which is what Floyd Rose had officially reissued, I don't know why they do 83. That would have been a little bit cooler for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. So once you get to the 84, then it's basically identical. I mean, I will say one thing though. Is very similar to the F4X that they today. That actually saw one then. On the Les Paul Floyds, they have little lines on them. It's very hard to see right here, but they have little lines indicating the heights. But I have seen some on these, which are the same saddles, same base plates. Now on the Paul, which is the only term I can find them using, the base plates were thinner. So they were really, really thin because you needed that extra room to get on here. So if you see here, it's actually thinner than up here, even though it's all one piece. Yeah. The bottom is really thin.
Wow.
Even though these were cast. But because these didn't really sell very well, they probably had a bunch left over. They made regular Floyd Rose trims using the same saddles and base plates. If you look underneath here, it actually has a beveled front end right there.
No, yeah.
Interesting. Sure it does.
Yeah, they use those saddles for warranty repairs. So like someone did something to their Floyd, they took off those saddles of those Les Paul Floyds and then put them on a regular one like that.
Wow.
And those are pretty rare. You don't see those not too often. I guess the Les Paul Floyds had issues with something with the springs, but they just didn't go over very well.
Well, yeah, there's what, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 10 little springs down here to simulate the 3 big ones that you would see on a normal trim. And another thing somebody pointed out too, I think Kimsey pointed out, was how do you keep these from going forward? I mean, they're only, some of these only, well, there's also the ESP Mighty Vice. So there's different versions of this too.
He was talking about the ESP Mighty Vice. So the ESP Mighty Vice had, that was an 83 that had the, this thing I showed. Yeah, this is a locking nut. What Eddie was, it was kind of like this Les Paul trim that Mike is showing. Yeah. But
were those before?
Yeah, the Mighty Vice came out in 83 and the one you're showing came out in 85, 86.
Right. So it's kind of funny how, they must have saw something in it. I don't know how many they sold of the ESP Mighty Vices, but they must have sold enough to start making this. But
obviously the Les Paul Floyd, didn't have the fingered tuners at the locking nut, like the Mighty Vice.
Yeah. And then really nothing changed until I guess the speed loader.
Yeah. Well, one quick thing, so the 83 German Floyd Schaller, those had the sticker said made in West Germany. A lot of times the sticker came off. So one thing you can do, so like the sticker came off of it, But the one way I identify it is on the bottom, they don't have made in Germany on the bottom of the base plate. So that's what, if the sticker came off, you know that. Also, there's no patent stamp or anything. And the insert blocks are made out of some kind of unplated steel on it. It's some kind of, yeah. The 1984s are pretty much almost identical. They have a thicker base plate like the 83, but these ones said made in Germany on
kind of
the bottom of it.
Embossed in there,
embossed. Right. So these are, yeah, and that was really common, and it had no patent stamp on the front of it. So that's how you know it's in 1984. So no patent stamp on the front, and it had a made in Germany stamp on the bottom, and also it's a thicker base plate like the 83. On 1985 and the newer, so I mean that's they had the base plate was just a little bit thinner, and because Floyd was awarded the patent stamp is actually on the front of the sustain block. So that's how you know if it's a 1985, if it's got the patent stamp on it, it's a 1985 or newer.
Okay. So just fast forward now. So now you have like, you know, the FRT 1000. You have the FRT. What is the real cheap one called? That it's
Well, they got the special, yeah. The FRT 1000s are the Korean made. They're supposed to be the higher quality. They're not the German ones, but the higher quality ones made. And they got the special, and they use the designations. They got the 2000, 3000, 4000 base for colors, and then and that stuff is all. It's just their lower cost versions, and I mean the design didn't really change at all. I mean they changed the Floyd logo a little bit, different kinds of stamps, the way they etched it. But the newer ones are a little different. You know, sometimes they might not line up exactly. If you put in, you know, where they line up, they started seeing them recently so now they're not cast anymore. They're actually CNC'd and they're milled.
Just the saddles, I believe, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right
So what do you think of the quality? I see a lot of people online just totally trash FRT. They say FRT 1000s are complete garbage. Throw it away. But we had talked a little bit earlier about it, and you say, you know, maybe they're not horrible, but there's things you can do to make them a little better. So you guys want to elaborate a little on that and what you think of them anyway? I mean,
well, any price point where you get below a certain thing, the guitar is, you know, well, you might as well throw the whole guitar away. So it does make sense. You know, there's always upgradable things with anything, and just like with the Floyds, you know, it depends on the hardness of the metals. It depends on the tunings. It depends on the main problem are the posts. I think, you know, the special posts. If there's one thing you're going to do to make it better is to get, you know, made in, you know, German Floyd posts. I think is one of the major things you can do. Another might be the blocks, because those seem to kind of crack out a little bit. But yeah,
string block inserts.
Yeah. Those seem to crack a little easier.
I agree. I mean, replace Mike mentioned the post. That's important because the problem. I mean, if you got a floating trim, you got to go with the highest quality, because you got to have those nice knife edges sharp. You know, like, because you got to have good posts and knife edges, or if you have floating trim, it's just not gonna hold up that well. But if you're having it blocked, you know, like what Ed had, I mean, you can, even if you got dull posts, I mean, you can still get by with it a little bit, I guess, to an extent. But I'm a big fan of stainless steel insert blocks or titanium. I think that's I like that, because over time they kind of squish. Sometimes the older ones, it really depends. I always just get an older Floyd. If you're just you know, just dive bombing, you can get an older Floyd. A lot of times the problem when you get an old Floyd is at some point in time, some guy twisted the knife edges when it's still on there, and that dulls it out a little bit, and so it's not going to stay floating. Yeah, what's that?
Guilty of that.
Yeah, well, those old ones, but the old ones are getting expensive now too. You know, but like I would say, if you're gonna have it floating, you gotta get a high quality bridge. Just get a German one. Otherwise, you know, put some stainless hardware in there. That's always, you know, that's what Ed was doing. I mean, the titanium Floyd Rose existed because of Ed at an AM show. I mean, he won Tysonics made a titanium block, and he wanted one, and that's how the titanium Floyd came into existence. Pretty much is because Ed was like, oh, let's try it, and they contracted out, and that's how and Ed liked the titanium stuff too. The insert blocks.
Like the insert blocks, yeah.
Do you like it more for the durability, or was there a tone thing about
Ed could probably hear any tonal difference with anything. So for him, it was probably the tone. I don't think he had a problem with stability on any of the earlier trims. Mate.
I think he liked the titanium screws to the nut too, right? The titanium screws to the nut, because his guitar tech, the last guy, Tom Weber, I think he said that they used to crank those down every 2 or 3 shows. They used to have to change them. I mean, because he cranked it down so tight on there.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, Tom said however many years he was with them, Ed was using those FRT 1000s, I think, on his Wolfgangs, the USA ones that he was using, and said they never changed one all the time he was there. I guess maybe they just did what you guys said. They just did little upgrades in there,
Yeah.
Any place where the string is getting locked or blocked, I think the harder that is, the better and more stability.
What you said, John, you're right. I remember that interview. Tom did say that that's a big change, because the problem with the insert blocks, the steel ones, even the old ones, if you really cranked on it, they started to kind of squish even a little bit. So it's kind of hard to put them in. And stainless steel or titanium insert blocks I really like those. And then even they won't rust and all that stuff. Even like the intonation screws are.
How many times you try to use an old Floyd and try to get those blocks to move? It's almost impossible.
The sweat in there, right?
Yeah. But I think, Charles, you mentioned the tone. The metal is just like pickups almost. They all have a different sound to it. The titanium, so you can tell if you have a full titanium Floyd, that's a really different sound to that. It's really it attacks a lot, and it's really different. Like that's why you got to mix and match.
Is a titanium Floyd, like if you had a whole Floyd that was made of titanium and you were to hold it next to just a regular Floyd, wouldn't the regular Floyd be heavier? Because titanium is lighter, right?
It is a lighter, yeah. It is lighter. Yep, it is a lighter trim. Mm-hmm. Those are really nice. They stopped making them though. They had some issues with the guy making the Tysonics, so they stopped making the titanium Floyds. But that Ed liked. He had a few titanium nuts, and he liked it. I guess he had some parts and he selected titanium stuff. But so talking about the metals, I tried a lot of stuff out. What people always forget about, Ed used, basically let's say all his years in the 70s and 80s with the Floyds, he used a fat steel sustain block. And that's still my favorite. Why I like the steel is that it has a very tight bottom end to it. It's very tight. Whereas like brass is a little more spongy.
When you say a bottom end, you talking about when you dump that bar and you come up out of the hole. Is that what you're talking about? No,
it's kind of like when you're chugging with
talk about the tone of the guitar with the amp.
I got you.
I got you. Yeah. With the sustain block, so what John's holding there, because Ed had a steel one, just plain steel, like throughout the with the FRT 1 to the FRT 5s, and that one, it's got a tighter bottom end to it. And I've tried every single trim I got in that Frankenstrat back there, and steel is always. You have to mix and match because it really depends on the wood and the pickups. Because I have experimented, it does change a little bit. I'm not a fan of brass. Brass does work in some cases. I don't like brass as much because to me it's a little more spongy, the bottom end is a little more spongy to me. Whereas steel and like it's stainless steel, it seems to capture a wider spectrum to me. Aluminum, I like aluminum with distortion. Everything has a different slight feel to it. But like to me, Ed, he preferred those big steel blocks. A lot of guys, what they do is they might buy a Floyd Rose reissue. And they put the brass. To me, the brass is not what I use. You got to put a steel block. But here's the big issue, I guess. Me and Mike forgot to mention this. The problem with getting a steel block is, for one, no one makes them. Two, the old steel blocks. So the Japan Fernando stuff, it's a wider string space now, and so you cannot take this block and put it on a German Floyd. Same with the whale tail Hanson. They're a wider string spacing, so you can't do that. the one thing you can do there. Okay, the one tremor. Okay, we forgot to mention. I'll mention it now. Is the Floyd Rose FRT7, which is this is what they. So remember how I mentioned that he was still contracted with Fernandez when the Schaller's making him 85. Fernandez sold the German Schaller ones in Japan, and they also were contracted. They could also make their own official Floyds, and they made this thing called the FRT7, which is basically an FRT5. It's got the side logo to it, and these are like one of my favorites. These are built incredibly well. Actually, I think it's slightly better than the German ones, maybe in some cases. But and so like I call this the poor man's whale tail. So if you can get one of these, you put a steel block on it. It's pretty close to it, to the whale tail. But that's one issue. So a lot of people, there's a lot of people, they try to like buy, they go on the Japanese market or something, and then they'll try to find an FRT3 with a steel sustain block. And they're like, I'm just going to put that on my 1984 Floyd Rose reissue and my Frankenstrat clone or whatever. And then they're like, and then it doesn't work.
It doesn't fit.
Yeah, it doesn't fit.
Hey guys, there was a question back here. I don't want to, I think it was Jeff. Yeah. Before we get too far, I don't want to forget about that. Jeff, where was your question?
How far back, John?
It was only a few minutes ago.
Was it the special?
It was.
And the Wolfgang?
Yeah. Is the FRT special on the low end stock Wolfgang standards? I'm not sure if the FRT special is on the Wolfgang standards, the cheaper ones. And is it okay if it's decked or just for stability? I mean, for that, can you upgrade that? Can you put better posts on that to make that a little better too? Do you think that's worth doing something like that on the lower end one?
Unless you're having a problem with it, I wouldn't replace anything. But
right,
as a rule of thumb, I think the post and maybe the nut. But
does anyone actually ever buy one of those stock and it actually work?
Honestly, I haven't had many specials. I had one a long time ago, and I just never use it. But I don't really know. When it's on, if you're doing like a Wolfgang or Ed, it's, I think he said deck, so it's like blocked. I mean, that helps out because the Floyd specials, I mean, if you have it floating, so that kind of makes it more difficult. But if it's blocked, if for the Floyd special, I don't know, man. I mean, what I would do is replace the insert blocks with stainless steel or titanium, and maybe the block, and see how that goes. And if the saddles break, just replace the saddles. I don't know.
Interesting.
As long as your springs are tight enough, it'll bring back anything at the right point. But at that point, the nut too. If there's anything slipping on the nut, those are a little bit softer metals than what should be. And somebody was mentioning the metal hardness. I mean, the base plates are hardened steel, so they go through a process of hardening and either case hardening or through hardening. So if you have the posts that are one hardness and the trem base plate at another hardness, one's going to overpower the other and wear out. So it's always best to have,
and that's part of the curse of having the special, because the whole point of it being a lower dollar point,
a little softer,
price quality metal, right.
I know some people say don't ever use a special, don't ever do this, but it's really whatever you can afford.
Well, I guess part of my frustration was and I've only been into Floyd's for about 4 years now, and because I got in guitar like 10 years ago, and so my learning curve was buying a $400 guitar at Guitar Center that had a Floyd. It was an LTD, Floyd Rose licensed Floyd. And that thing, all I did was learn how to tune a guitar really well, over and over and over. And I was frustrated. And so I started researching on YouTube. That's how I met a lot of these guys. And
might as well have a regular stretch trim on there. Right?
It was 3 or 4 guitars later where I think, I got to spend more money. I got to do this, get it. And, the first one I had was, it was a black metal. And some guys were telling me it just had a high, a dirty metal content. It just wasn't quality. But the metal itself seemed stable. And what I noticed was all of the pressure points where the screws would come together to the saddle and where the saddles would lock down. And, you know, if they don't stay right there, your guitar's not going to stay intonated.
Mm-hmm.
If everything's not tight, and the whole point of it moving constantly is relieved. And the strings, I'm talking about the strings where they go into the block. You're relieving it, and then you're snapping it back over and over again. So I have one special right now and a couple of real Floyds. The special I have, as far as structurally, it's stainless steel. It's thick. It's good quality. And I've compared it to the other. And the only difference are really the screws and the quality of how, and but you can feel it when you go to dial it in and you're making a fine tuner and you go to, it doesn't feel smooth. It feels kind of sluggish, almost like it's cross-threaded, but it's not. And I swear you can almost feel the metal just inside those screws where they're turning. You can almost feel it just wearing away.
And that's part of why it's a little bit cheaper than.
But that comes to the age-old question.
It all comes down to
it. I mean, Floyd or just, should I?
Oh, yeah. If you can,
I look at it this way. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I'm just saying, if you can afford a German Floyd or a higher-end Floyd, then, by all means do it. But also, usually the specials come on a lower-end model guitar, which might have problems of its own with its neck and its build quality there too. So it all could come into play. I've had guitars where one little thing was wrong with it and everything worked fine, or just little things like that. Make sure the neck screws are tightened in there. A lot of things. Sometimes the necks aren't really set up right, or you can easily bend it. It all plays a part in it. And the Floyd is just another the quality of the Floyd is just another part of the puzzle. So but like you said, just change one thing at a time. If it's not doing something right, change one thing and don't, just get it to where you don't normally want to get it.
If you're a couch player and you're not playing 150 shows a year, if you do these little upgrades like you're saying right here, you'll probably be fine with the FRT 1000 or whatever like that. But one thing we didn't talk about much was the nuts on the Floyds. You had the humpback nuts. How many different variations of the nuts from the beginning did we have until now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So like the earlier Japanese ones, so those are like what the 5150 has on it, or I mean the whale tail Hanson Metalworks, it's called the humpback. They're very different than the Schaller ones. They're so they all them, man. Mike, you got some lucky nuts to show them?
These are the regular ones on here. This is like from the 80s one.
That's a Schaller one,
right,
a German one.
So where the point is at the top there on the humpbacks, it's actually like a circular kind of round kind of humpback.
Round.
Yeah.
Which was the original.
Mike's got them all. He's got all of them to show. I don't got a whole much, but the earlier.
This one was from an USA FRT3. So this is basically what they all kind of look like. There's some differences with them. The nut, if it went sideways, how it was shaped, but this is basically how they all looked. Once again, it's very hard to see if you go to Darren's website.
They're hand milled. Yep. Those are the ones we talk about. They're really high tolerances. So when you clamp them down, there wasn't a whole lot of room to twist. They were, and they needed to be because there's
them down.
Yeah, because they needed to be because there's no fine tuners. When you had fine tuners, it didn't have to be as precise because you could just fix with a fine tuner. But back in the FRT 1 and 3s, you couldn't do that. So they had to be pretty precise.
If you look at the nuts, they're all chrome plated except for the sides where you file them down. They're not plated on the side there. So that's where he would file them down. And also the actual nut itself had grooves milled into, once again, this is very hard to see, at least on my end, but there was grooves milled into the string slots, which did help a little bit too. It kept its place.
Yeah, because what a guy from Japan told, so this guy's maybe a little biased, but he claims the Japanese made ones and the early ones were a little harder, so they had to put those grooves in there because the German ones you didn't need to as much, but they put those grooves to place them down. And he said they're just a little little more built quality, harder, I guess.
Are they like V-shaped, those grooves on like that one, Mike? Or are they like, I thought I saw somewhere they were almost like square shaped. Did they make one
The
like
grips
that?
for the strings.
Yeah. But I know
Some of them were.
Yeah, there's a lot of variations. There's a lot of because a lot of these are hand milled, and
right.
And some of these we don't know. Like I just got a Japanese FRT1 locking nut coming here soon, and I want to check that out because I got to see what that's like. But yeah, a lot of these were hand milled. But in 1983, late 82, they started casting them. Japan, Fernandez, and those ones had 4508 on the lock. Is that one of those, Mike?
No, this is a whale tail hand milled.
Okay.
But there's just a little bit of differences here and there. Some of these look like the nuts might have been cast. Some of them look like they might have been milled. But the nuts itself were actually milled. So it's at some.
Looks like he's going out. So what he's trying to say, he went out there a little bit, Mike. Yeah, so like the milled, the very earliest ones. So FRT1, what Eddie had, and his Bumblebee and Frankenstrat 80, 81, and his other guitars, those were all milled most likely. And we don't got a lot of good photographs. It's just hard. We don't got a lot of pictures of them. That's a thing from that era. But and then in like late 82, 83, and then 83, then they started casting them more. And just because it's cast or milled doesn't mean the quality, because you can make high and low quality cast versus milled steel. So I mean, they're pretty good quality of them. But yeah, the humpback saddles. So like if you're doing a 5150 or a Frankenstrat and you can buy one of the Fernandez Japanese locking nuts. Those are high quality and they fit the part. That's what I always recommend.
That's what was on. Yeah, this is what was on the 5150 or the 4508 Fernandez made nuts, humpback nuts, which are essentially just like the handmade nuts, except these were all cast and produced a lot of time. And Fernandez used these style nuts for a long time. I had a Kramer B4187, which is one off from what we think the 1984 is, and they had 4508 nut on them. So Kramer was using parts from Fernandez and Godo tuners and everything before the shower.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. There are instances, and when you find a whale tail on a Kramer B plate with a Hansen metalwork, there have been a few instances where there have been Japanese locking nuts and string retainers. The string retainers are Japanese, so the string retainer on the 5150 and the Frankenstrat at that time, those are Japanese made. Those are all over in Japan in 1982. Yeah, so it's they're cut off. They're circling the cut off of that's Japanese.
Yeah, this one's this is a copy, but they're even shorter than that, right?
Yeah, all those are Japanese. Fun. Yeah, same with really so if the Rasta guitar, the prototype, the Rasta one had the prototype FRT5 on it, the very first one. There's a picture you can see in the background with the Rasta with the first prototype FRT5. That locking nut, he has that stainless steel rectangular one. That's Japanese. I got one. I came on a ESP Navigator straight out of Japan with the Floyd on it. So those so the Japanese definitely had their hands tied into that. And I'm pretty sure all of Ed's stuff, that was the metal shop at Kyoto or Japan or something, I think. So little fun fact. So for those of you looking for like the most precise locking nuts and string retainers, well, you got to search. They're finding the Japanese market that isn't that easy to find, but they pop up on eBay sometimes. You can find them, but that's what it was.
And even then, they differ too. I mean, the first string retainers were either flat or half round, right? So I have a brass one that's very similar to Eddie's that was on the B. So this is a brass one. Oh, I'm losing something here.
That's like that's like super. So that's just like what Ed had on the Bumblebee. He had a brass one, just like what Mike's holding on that with FRT one.
Yeah. So it's half round, but it's not. It's really weird. The sides
are bottom, right?
It's flat on the bottom, flat on top, but the sides are made to look. They have a little nib right here. It's really weird. And then from there, then they went to stainless steel. They went to a couple different ones, half rounds and then full rounds. And then by the time you got to, see, here's a half round stainless steel.
That's similar. That's the one that was on the similar to the one on the Rasta with the FRT5 prototype on the Rasta. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty similar to that.
this
one.
is 81 ish. Then they went to, but before Schaller was making them, I still think they were brass, and they were chrome plated brass, probably out of Japan. Until you got to Schaller, and then Schaller made them from stainless steel, and then they made them half rounds for actually a short time.
Yeah,
and then they finally went to the molded flat top, like you kind of see.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, keep in mind there's a lot of clones out there in the Japanese market. So, like, there's a lot of FRT3 clones, FRT4 clones, and 5 clones, and they're out there. And a lot of people think, if you go on the website, I go through how to identify that. But the Japanese, obviously, they're cloning stuff, and there's a lot of that stuff floating around. So if you see something that pops up on eBay saying, this is what Ed had, this is a prototype, this Floyd Rose, be leery. You have to know how to identify, because some of them look really close, but a lot of them are like chrome plated brass and a little different. But sometimes the factories might have made some of them the same factories, but they're not official Floyds. So you got to be leery on that stuff as well.
Aria made a lot of them. Yamaha made some.
Yeah. So there's one company called Double Eagle, which is, they sold parts in the United States. And if you looked at the Veneman catalogs from like 82, 83, 84, I mean, you could buy these things. They're called Double Eagles. And they were really the very first ever Floyd Rose clones ever made. And they're actually really cool. But they're like a third the price of the Floyd, and they look really, but they're clones. They're not the real deal. But if you want to know any better, you think it'd be some, prototype Floyd or early FRT3 or whatever, but they are different.
So that actually segues nicely into the next thing I want to talk about, is talk about your website. So Darren, talk about yours, and Tony, we have their websites in our description, right?
Yeah, we do. They're down below, both of them.
Yeah, so everybody make sure you check out the websites. But go ahead and talk a little about your websites, what we're going to see on there.
Yeah, so vintagefloydrose.com, I've been working on that for like 3 years now. It started, I was doing all this research, making these Google Docs, and I'm like, I've made websites in the past. I had a vintage Washburn website and some other guitar websites. So I just put all my stuff on the website, and it got out of hand. It's like psychotic amount of information. And it's like everything, it's just really crazy. And everything we talk about tonight, I go in 10 times more detail on every there's a lot of reading, and there's a lot of pictures, because it's kind of hard to see. And I made really good visual pictures and everything. Go to the which one is it? Go to so scroll down to the third one down, David Petchlap prototype. That's the one, if you guys are curious about what this is the guy who made the mini Les Paul, and what I talked about with his Floyd Rose, I talk about it all on there. The link above that talks about the Double Eagle Floyd Rose copies. You can how to identify a clone, compare that, and I basically have how to identify the stuff. I just updated all this. I still got a few more things to do, but lots of Eddie Van Halen stuff.
Guys, it's hours of entertainment on this website. You'll be in there. You'll be clicking and reading all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
make it a point to go here, guys.
It's pure insanity. Like it's like I went way overboard. It's like craziness.
And if you good advice is just to look at just one model at a time. Maybe just take all the information on the FRT1s first, because it'll get overbearing and overwhelming.
Start from the beginning and work your way down, because it's hard to understand one model without kind of understanding the last. Mm-hmm. And it's pure, it's pure craziness. But Eddie Van Halen, if you guys like Eddie Van Halen, I mean, this is for you, because there's obviously Eddie was there from the beginning, so he was involved with it. So it's pretty nuts. I talked to not Floyd Rose, but I talked to people at Floyd Rose company. Andy Papiccia right there in the middle. He's actually the president. He's taking care of it. And I talked to him, and I think he looked at the website and he's like, this guy's insane. He's crazy.
Nice shot of the back of the
Have
Frankie.
either of you guys ever met or spoken to Floyd himself?
I have not.
I've tried
he's
many
tough.
times.
Yeah, we both have. I've talked to Andy Papiccia, who was just in that photo. Andy Papiccia was with Kramer Guitars, and he's actually the president of Floyd Rose. He told me that he has a bunch of videos and photos that have never been seen from the Kramer factory with Ed. And I talked to him like sometime a couple of years ago, and he said he's going to get it and release it to the public. And because he's got everything, photos, videos from the factory. And I'm like, do it, man. Like, do it now, because here's what I'm saying, because like you guys, Charles, John, Tony, like you guys were there into the beginning of like, you guys were like the first generation Van Halen people. Like me, Mike and I are a little younger, but like when you guys are gone 30 years from now, like all these people are going to be passed away. And like, to me, it's like, it's good to capture this information now as primary sources, because I got a couple different websites, and when the guys are gone, they pass away, they're gone. I mean, look what happened with Ed. And like, so like, I respect you guys a lot, because you guys like been there. Like you're looking at the Frangus Red and magazines trying to figure it out. Like same with like, like Rob and Dimitri, all these guys, like, now it's so easy now, like, you can just go on the internet and try to look at stuff, but you guys were like in the old school stuff, and that's so awesome. I'm just trying to put the information down so it's easier for people to one-stop shop and kind of look at it. And it's kind of fun for me. But I told Andy Papiccio, I said, he's like 66 right now, 67, and he's not getting any younger, right? So hopefully he releases all that photos and videos.
It's historical stuff, and you know what I mean? And they should appreciate, Floyd should appreciate, Andy should appreciate, I'm sure he does, your website, because I mean, this is an homage to, the Floyd Rose and just, the incredible invention, you know what I mean? And I really think they should be supporting, stuff like this. It's really cool. They should really actively and give you, hey, here's some photos, put up there on your site.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And they are. He's pretty supportive. He likes it too. He's a pretty busy guy. I told him to retire and just focus on giving us all the Van Halen stuff.
Well, hopefully he does that. I hope he does that.
Yeah. Speaking of go back to the Sammy Hagar, yellow Kramer there. Fun fact, I forgot to mention this. In 1985, for a brief moment of time, you could buy a colored Floyd. So Sammy Hagar's got that red, it's powder coated red. And they made white ones as well for Hammer guitars. They illegally, supposedly, they didn't want him to make it. And Helmut Schaller, he was making them, and I guess he was told not to. And he's like, oh boy, I'm going to get in trouble for this. But there are a very limited few of colored Floyds from 1985 that do exist. Hard to find. Wow. Like what Sammy Hagar has on that Pacer right there.
Yeah.
I found a white nut. That's about as much as I got. But I have seen, white.
Wow.
Yeah, so lots of pictures, lots of craziness and everything. So I still got to work on. I put on a lot of time in go to the ESP Magician. Scroll that down there. The ESP Magician is the very first ever clone of an FRT5. It was actually released the same time as the Hanson Metalworks Whale Tail. Fun fact. That's the very first ever FRT5 clone in existence. I got one. It's built similar to the Whale Tail. It's actually really nice. It cost $500 back in 1983.
Wow.
So,
oh, wow.
You can only find those in Japan.
Yeah.
I got one. They're really nice. That's a little fun fact. That's one of my favorite clones ever made. Is that one?
That's pretty cool.
Really cool. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, there's craziness.
Yeah, everybody check that out. That's in the description. Make it a point to go there, and I'm telling you, there's
huge, a lot of stuff here.
Great information in there.
A lot of
amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And Mike, you want to talk about your website?
Yeah, but just one more thing before that. We didn't talk about the posts, but the posts are
absolutely
the different heads on the earlier ones, and I have a bunch of them, and they're all completely different because they were all handmade, and they were all basically modified lag bolts turned on a lathe. I mean, these are 4 right here that are from the same batch that of parts that I got, and they're all completely different. different thicknesses. The head shapes are a little bit different. Different lengths and everything. But these are like the original ones that would have been on the FRT1s, FRT, all the way up until basically FRT5s and the shallower ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Fernandez was making them too, and they had this style up until a certain time. And then they switched to the regular V-shaped ones. But even the Fernandez ones were a little bit different. They had they were thinner than the shallower ones. So if you put a Fernandez one in a shallower size post, it'll just flop around. So it's another thing to watch out for.
Yeah. So if you have a Frankenstrat copy, so you're saying if you want to do, you got a real whale tail and you got the posts are thinner. So if it's drilled for a regular shallower post, you're going to put a whale tail post in there, it's going to be too solid,
it'll
right?
Yeah, it'll just push forward.
That's something people miss. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, once again, everything was kind of just as they were, handmade. You get what you get.
There's a lot of variations in that too with the post. There's probably 5 or 6 different versions of that too that are kind of all over the place, and it gets confusing because like Floyd was in like 81, 82, like he's kind of mixing some like USA and Japanese stuff by then. Yeah. So like you see a little everything.
Mm-hmm. It almost seems like the posts were a little bit of an afterthought to everything else. I don't know. Maybe that's not true, but it seems like they were so focused on the other stuff. It's like, yeah. They're good. Those, but I guess.
Well, I don't know of too many designs that were like this with the 2 fulcrum points before this. So everything, the posts had to be made from something and something hard. So, unless like you said, until Fernandez got involved, he had to either hand make them or hand tool them or have somebody do them.
It's amazing that when you said that.
Yeah, and then have them hardened. I mean, you can see the mark on the shaft where the lathe starts, and then it goes into the different head shapes.
The shallower ones are probably still the best because you can. There's more range in a dive bomb, right, compared to the older posts.
That's another good point. Well. There's one post that I found that works with basically any Floyd, and it goes back to what I said in the beginning, where you have the knife edge on the either way high on the base plate or in the middle or down below, and it has an effect on where it's going to turn. So if you have a head that's not really designed for that certain Floyd model, it might just go like this, and you might hit the top of it. Same thing, if you're going to bend down on it, it might not allow you to bend down on it. So
it's about a binding issue is what you're talking about. It's almost like snapping at a point.
It could,
the middle's moving. I got you.
So Mike, there is one that you found that works pretty well.
Yeah, there's one. I call it the universal post because it seems to work with every model Floyd that I've had. But once you get into the shallower ones, they had a bigger. If you look at the bottom of them, they were a huge wide relief down here. I mean, it's really big. And if you look at some of the earlier ones, it's maybe half that.
Oh wow!
Look at that! Wow, look at the difference.
Yeah. So the posts have a huge determination on whether you're going to be able to use that Floyd or not.
And that's why some later license copies just have one post. In the base plate, it's just flat, so it can kind of. It's a little easier to place it and with the space and whatever, kind of like the Godos, that's how they do that. So there's so many little, there's still a lot of things there's all these weird license copies once it happened. And in like 85 to 89, obviously that was when all the there's actually a lot of amazing license designs that came out later on, but that's a whole nother story, it's and craziness, so but regarding the Floyds, it's pretty interesting. There's just so many the cool part is that the pre-Kramer stuff is like really nuts. People just thought there was one prototype Floyd on the Bumblebee and he had the whale tail and a lot of people, there's like a weird gold one there. What is that? Whatever.
It's one off for Eddie, right? I mean, there's not a
yeah, it goes so deep, you know. If you go to like the Fernandez catalogs, 82, 83, 84, it's all there. I mean, check out and all that's on the website too. And it's like, whoa, it was there the whole time. It's just insanity.
There's things that you're looking at now that are just still kind of what is that? You know, I mean, it's some stuff is very easily overlooked and even with different, you know, models, Floyd. So it's anything with Eddie's stuff is always hard to find or one of a kind or
all those things are really those FRT 1s, 4s. Well, it's all that stuff is pretty tough to find. Supposedly there's only like 50 USA FRT 1s made, and like, well, it's just the FRT 4s are tough to find, and it's really collectible. You know, it's almost like addicting to like collect the stuff because it's pretty interesting. Like once you got it in your hands, but it's a lot of it's not. It's kind of important for tremolo history. I'm a big tremolo history guy. I think it's so important, and the Floyd Rose is important. Mm-hmm. And I got a 1953 prototype, one of the 12 ever made. It's a 19. This is for the prototype test strats in late 1953. Wow. This is one of them made out of aluminum, and like so I like collecting these. The you know, I'm just all into that stuff because I like. It's important for guitar history. It's like, I mean, so like what I like to, you know, like me and Mike and I, and like, I like with Eddie Van Halen 80s guitars. I mean, if you go to like, I even mentioned this on the website, like Fender, Gibson, there's like 50 books about each brand name, right? You can find, it's easy. If you want to know the history, it's there. But like Floyd Rose history and like, even like, you know, like even like Charvel, Boogie Bodies, all that stuff. It's like, it's really not available. I mean, it's not really. And it's like, to me, it's like, why isn't it? You know what I mean? Even like Eddie Van Halen stuff. I mean, there's, you know, it's like, there's all that information somewhere, but it's like scattered everywhere. Right. Mm-hmm. And whereas like the origin gear, like Fender Gibson, it's easy, but like the stuff from the 80s, it's not collected that well. And to me, it's like crazy. So I feel like I try to like do that, you know.
Yeah, you've got all the information. Cool. That's right.
You're the keeper of the flame, dude. You're the keeper of the
flame. I'm trying.
Absolutely.
So we had one quick question I saw up here too. Let me just I just caught my eye. Chris Hunter wanted to know, can I ask you guys' opinions on the Ibanez versions retakes on the Floyd designs? Any thoughts on those?
Oh man. Guy, I get so many questions on the Ibanez
Edge, right? Edge Pro.
And the Edge. They are really good. Yeah, they're one of the best licensed trims. Yes, they are really solid. They make a great design. Ping and the companies who redesigned it, a lot of them are probably those companies were involved way back when designed it. And yeah, the Ibanez Edge, those trims are really extremely well built.
Interesting question about that. So I was talking about that Floyd Rose special. I have an Ibanez, and it has a what would be comparable? It's the Edge Pro, not it's the middle of the road, right?
Yep.
It stays in tune wonderfully. I mean, wonderfully. Yeah. I've never had to mess with it.
There's a lot of great licensed trims that arguably are better than, you know, the originals. Even like when Fernandez stopped the contract with Floyd in 85, 86, they basically took the FRT7 design and redesigned it and actually made it slightly better. You could like adjust the saddles, and like the Japanese made a lot of great licensed trims, and some of them were honestly improvements, and it's pretty interesting. And like the Ibanez Edge is one of them. There is a lot. The Japanese made a lot of great licensed trims. I make a few YouTube videos once in a while, and I always get people, what do you think about the Edge? What do you think about the Ibanez? There's a lot of Ibanez Edge fans out there, and I've owned a few of them, but I'm not super experienced with all of them, but they are good. Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
So I really don't have any experience with the Ibanez stuff, so I can't comment. I guess that's all that needs to be said on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of Ibanez Edge fans. I know that. Mm-hmm.
So, Mike, tell us about your website.
So, yeah, I started I used to build guitars, and I really got into designing and everything. So every time I would get a new guitar, I would just take it apart and 3D, design it into the CAD program. So I started, when I met Darren and got into this whole Floyd stuff, led me down. I was really just wanted Sirius said something. I think it's called Darren. So Yeah, I really just wanted a whale tail. That's and then Darren didn't have one, so I started looking and I couldn't get anything. So I started, just started looking for Floyds, and that's how I got into Floyds. But as I started collecting them, I would have something here missing, or the FRT, like I said, the FRT ones over here had 2 broken saddles. So trying to find parts is tough. So I mean, and then during COVID, I was just looking a lot online. I was trying to find a lot of original stuff for my builds, for 5150s and Frankenstrats and, just parts and stuff. So it kind of became a sanity, get out of, this COVID stuff for a while. And so I started collecting a whole bunch of parts, and now I'm kind of able to offer them for sale and stuff. So that's what this website is. It's Period Correct Guitar Parts. And it's basically any part that's been on Eddie's guitar that's, hard to find. And it's what I kind of like specializing in, is stuff that's hard to find, or stuff that's not been made in a while, or, neck plates and everything like this. So I've kind of put all my effort into this. I believe John has, what do you got there? Neck plate.
The neck plate right here. Fellas.
Yeah, the neck plate right there.
Look how
neck plates came in. So there's a 5150 neck plate made out of steel and chrome, and it's
steel,
made to
not
look,
aluminum, folks. Steel.
It's steel. I mean, it's made to look just like the original ones, which didn't look that great, to be honest. They weren't polished and highly chrome, and there was just real light chrome on there. So I've been making those. A bunch of other parts for Floyd's. Some T-blocks and fine tuners in the blocks, and stuff that people have been asking me since I have all this stuff Floyd. I'm like, well, yeah, I'll just make it. So
you CAD design the stuff, right? You take it, and I'm telling you, folks, is the website up? Ready? It's
up right now. Yeah, there's maybe 65% of the stuff that I want to have on there. A lot of it's still being made. A lot of it's still being looked at and updated all the time. But there's a good amount of stuff on there now that I think people would really dig.
This steel block is there. It's a 42 millimeter around there, right? Somewhere around there, right?
Yeah, that's 42 millimeter. So that's basically a whale tail block, same size, same dimensions. And the beauty of having all these Floyds and all these parts is that I have the right dimensions, and I have the right stuff to make the parts for either for builds or for existing bridges that are missing parts. That's a big deal.
That's a retrofit, right, Mike? So you
that one is a retrofit for a shallower, right? Yeah. So it's a different spacing, and it's a different screw thread than a whale tail would be.
Yeah.
We talked about that earlier. There's 3 or 4 different sizes that you can get, but depending on which model.
Yeah, so for those of you, there's a lot of, I think there's questions of what Floyd I get. The easiest way is get the 1984 reissue from Floyd Rose and just get one of those retrofit steel blocks, which is like the whale tail block. That's the easiest way to go about it.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know why they don't offer steel, but I guess I do.
This is one of your bars too here. So
it's also, make the whale tail style bars with the retrofit, with the bushing in there, since it is a little bit larger than what it would be on there.
The and there's everything in the back.
Yeah, same thread, same everything.
Yeah.
But I like getting the weird obscure stuff too, like the Mighty Mite pickups, or the DiMarzio super distortions, or stuff that if you were to look for yourself and try to find, it's either impossible, or you'd have to look a long time to find some stuff. I mean, I found some string trees for the 5150, the regular M's that were used on early Charvel stuff, but I could only find them in brass. But there were some that I found originals that were chrome. So I'll be offering some of those. And either if you can't get the original ones, I make reproductions of those. So I mean, you
guys want your mind blown? Check out. I'm just telling you, it's like Eddie. It's like Christmas for an Eddie fan. If you're doing a replica guitar or something like that, Frankenstein or 5150 or anything like that, your mind will be blown. I'm telling you, go there and both of these websites, check them out. You will not be disappointed. They're two of the coolest websites that anything related to Floyd and Van Halen and not just and Mike's got tons of other stuff on there too. It's going to blow your mind. Go there and come back next week and talk about it with us because your mind will be blown. My jaw just dropped when I went on your website the first time. Oh my! I was messaging you. I'm like, oh my God! It's just like it's insane, you know. So
that was what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be kind of a one-stop shop for a lot of the stuff that you had to source from eBay, or you had to go over here, or and I dedicated the last 2 years to kind of building this up and sourcing the right parts, the right stuff. There's something that's comes. We didn't know that the CRL switch was a PA starting number PA 222 number. We thought it was a CRL 1452 or whatever. So new stuff like that. I'm constantly looking for the real stuff.
Yeah, it's just laid out so well. The website. It's just I can't say enough good things about both of these websites. They're just awesome. Out of any websites we've ever talked about on here, these two are just top of the food chain. I'm telling you, go there tonight, and I'm telling you, message me. You will not be disappointed. It's mind blowing. That's all I'll say about this. It's just like we can finally talk about it. I've been like busting. I talked to Tony and Charles. I think we discussed this when the show went off. I would talk about it. It's like, oh my God, it's crazy. You got to check this out. So,
I'm still finding Darren's site that I haven't seen before. I told a couple of weeks ago, like, what is this? Is this new? He's like, no, it's been on there. I'm like, so take your time on his
Me
site.
too.
All I gotta say.
I forget some of the stuff I wrote on it. I have to go on my own site to research because I forget what I talked about. It's been so much stuff. But like going back to Mike's, Mike and I spent a lot of time and money and like on these vintage parts. They're cool, guys. Like we're obsessed, but like I tell you what, if you guys, it's a lot of time you got to spend to search for it and this, and having options. So if you get for those of you guys like building stuff like this, this is the way you got to do. There's so many good options nowadays, with like bodies, necks, and parts now, and like with mics and hardware. It's like, don't be like Mike and I and like go after this vintage stuff. You'll drive yourself crazy. We did the work for you. You don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And that stuff is so rare that it doesn't exist anymore. That stuff that you guys were looking for. So now you can just go get it here. It's just like everything's so much easier for you now. Stuff like this that 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, you would never be able to get this stuff. Yeah. Now it's like you go to these websites. Your mind.
Mike, I've got this up if you want to bring your site up.
What is it?
I've got your site if you want me to bring it up.
Yeah, just a little bit, just show a couple things, I guess. I wanted to keep things somewhat related to the guitars and,
You just launched this, so there wasn't a link earlier. So let's check it out.
Constantly adding stuff that's coming in every week or so. Like I said, I want to specialize in the hard to find stuff or the really rare stuff. So it's constantly coming in and going, pickups and a lot of the original stuff. Tremos, I just listed a couple of things on there. Stuff like the double tab shallow tuners, stuff that might be coming in a lot, something I might not see for a while, But I'm constantly looking. So if you want to have if you're looking for something, let me know and I'll put you on a list, try to find them. I've kind of dedicated, like I said, the last couple of years to finding all of this stuff on my own. And it got to the point where I don't have time to work on making the guitars.
Wow.
I mean, look at this stuff here. Just look at the no logo Godo tuners, no logo.
Yeah. So those would be correct for the Frankenstrat and the 5150. Darren's site also EVH Van Halen Gear.com. There's also a lot of information on that with Eddie's guitars and everything. Did I get it right? Halengear.com?
Yeah, that one's a work in progress, but yeah, there's still stuff
Work
on
in
that.
progress, something like that. You know, between
Nice.
Donnie knows everything. You know, all these guys that I've been talking to, and we all know, and they're on this show and everything. You know, you know, all these parts are kind of gathered to build what we've all been talking about. So
Sure.
glad. And if there's anything else on there that people might want, you know, I'd be happy to take a look at some stuff and either get it made or try to source. You know,
Sure. That's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely check these sites out. Both of these sites are hours of entertainment. So I'm telling you, will not be disappointed. Can't say enough good things about them.
yeah. Thanks. You know, thanks for doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. We'll keep it out. It'll be on there.
Yeah.
The links to this will be on there. And
Yeah. It's a high emphasis on you know,
authentic.
hard to find authentic parts and
That is outstanding.
Yeah, I mean,
Right on.
is there any questions from like Floyd stuff that we missed?
yeah. Any last questions out there? Anybody got any questions? No. So you were saying that like somebody wants to do an FRT5 replica. Obviously, you can't get the real one anymore. So you're saying to go out and buy that 1984 one and work from there.
That'd be a good thing, you know.
You would change the block to the steel block.
Yeah.
Change the block to steel block. Maybe get the bar.
The bar. Okay.
There's the easiest way is get the 1984 reissue from Floyd Rose and then get the retrofit block. That'd be close. You can get like an FRT7, a used one, and put the steel block on there. But yeah, that's probably the easiest, quickest way to get that.
Mm-hmm.
What year did they go away from the diamond knurl fine tuner screws?
As far as I know, those were only on the whale tails. As far as I know.
Whale tail only, yeah. Yep.
The diamond, yeah.
Yep. The Fernandez, the Japanese stuff was stainless steel.
They're all the straight knurl.
Some straight knurl.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Terry, like get an FRT5 replica. You will love it. Nobody can touch it. That's it. So
Excellent.
any other questions? Well, listen, guys, I want to thank you guys for coming on here tonight. This is just a great show. I really enjoyed this. You know, I learned so much about the Floyd Rose that I never did.
All of us did.
This has been incredibly informative.
Man.
Never.
Yeah.
All stem from Darren and his website and you know, talking with him. And I mean, it's amazing what he's put up on there. It really is. I mean, just hours and hours of time put into this. But like his name says, Guitar Historical Archive. So he's really looking to archive all this stuff. So if anybody can get any information from anybody that's worked on these things or anything, you know, it'd be great. It really would.
Pass it along. Yeah. Darren's the keeper of the flame here.
Yeah. I got more in the works. I got a Boogie Bodies one, a Charvel. I got some other stuff in the works too. You know, just finding eventually.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah,
in time.
We'll change your link, and we'll actually make it a link, Mike, in the description.
Okay.
As soon as the show's over, you'll be able to click on either of those. But this has been super fun and very informative. Man, we've all learned a lot.
I'm informed. I'm well informed now.
Goodness.
And we'd love to have you guys back again too. So you know, maybe we'll do part 2 of this one. You know, in the coming months too, if you guys are up for it, because we really appreciate it.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have some new information. I mean, you know,
exactly.
From a lot of stuff that we just fill in the holes that we were kind of just gathering for ourselves, and when kind of what makes sense with it. But it would be nice to have
uncharted territory.
Yeah, it just blows my mind when we have guys, you know, like you on. It's like detective work. It really is. Like, you know, we had Chris Gill on, and we were talking about, you know, and Donnie. We had them on about the Frankenstein guitar, and just listening to them for 2 hours, and just it's like forensic, detective work. It's incredible. And it's the same thing with you, Darren. All this stuff is like I'm just like I can't believe it. It's like wow, this is
And we all work together because like Mike's it's good to have different eyes. Like I talk to Donnie too, and Donnie sees stuff I don't see. Mike sees stuff I don't. It's like we're all collaborating together and having different eyes, and we see a lot of stuff, and we're able to make a lot of cool discoveries.
It's all about sharing information. So he'll put me on the case on something. I'll go try to find it out. And then, it'll seem to fit with certain things with the Frankenstrat or the 5150. We didn't know certain things a year ago until something pops up that we see on the marketplace or something. It's like you don't know sometimes until you see another example.
New photos pop up on some random Facebook page, and then it solves a mystery that would, it's crazy.
Yeah. But thank you to you two guys, because there's truly not enough information out there about the Floyd Rose.
It's true.
It's true. There really isn't. It's really uncharted territory, and one of the most important tremolos, and it's going to go down hundreds of years from now as supremely important. And there's really not a lot of information on it.
Darren's always looking 100 to 500 years in the future.
I don't look at like 10 years. What are they going to think about electric guitars 400 years from now? Like someone's going to want to know about Floyd and like, what is this? Like, what was that Eddie Van Halen had on? This is different. Like someone's going to want to know that 500 years from now. And it's easier to do it now.
Guy's going to be sporting a 400-year-old vintage.
Well, there's three important trims in the history of, modern rock music: the Bigsby, the Strat, and the Floyd Rose. In my mind, anyway.
That's exactly it. Yep. That's exactly it. The Floyd Rose was the next evolution in tremolo design. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if it gets any better than the Floyd. Really, it's like
can't go wrong with it.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It gets the job done.
400 years, I think a Floyd will still be able to be used.
Yeah,
stay in tune.
As a perfectly set up, if you have a good neck, body, and wood, and a perfectly set up Floyd Rose, it won't go out of tune.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, we appreciate it, and like I said, we'd love to have you back on again. So,
thanks for being here.
We can do this again.
Sounds good.
Before we get gone, let's thank a couple of people. Our friend Greg at Legend Picks. If you want guitar picks made, his links are down below. If you want a guitar built, our guy Neil Daly Custom Designs, his links are down below.
Love him.
Hit Neil up. Yep. And if you like the cigar box style of your guitar, we know a guy, Brendan B. Squared.
Love you, Brendan.
His links are down below. Check him out. Yeah. And thanks to everybody in the chat for hanging out tonight. Congratulations to Holly Lewis, our winner. Junebug was the answer. After all the bug answers and all the rest. Yeah. So, guys, one more time. Mike McGuire, Darren Drewek.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. You guys rock.
You guys rock.
Thanks for being here.
Right there.
Thank you for
do a part 2.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
We'll get some more trims or something.
Yeah, we'll buy some more stuff next time.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll focus more on the the copies or the
Yeah, we still just scratch the surface. I mean, we could talk about the clones and the post. I mean, we could go on forever. Yeah, but that's kind of the good early start stuff. The early beginnings.
Yeah,
we got a primer tonight.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Everybody have a great week. Have a great weekend. Coming up, it's Memorial Day. Be safe. If you're traveling, travel safe. Be safe on the road. and be safe off the road. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, we're having a party around here this weekend talking about the US Festival. Yep. And gonna be celebrating Memorial Day weekend. Hope yours is good. Let's see. All right, we're gonna bounce. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for
Give
having
a
us.
thumbs up.
Really
Thanks,
enjoyed it.
guys.
You guys rock.
All right. Bye, Charles.
Take care, you guys. Be well.
All right. Bye, John.
Any last words,
Bye, Mike.
Charles Green?
Hey, guys, just don't forget this is Halenville. And around here, it doesn't matter if you go north, south, east, or west. Every single road's going to lead right to Van Halen. Be well. Stay safe. Have a great weekend. And rock on. Take care, you guys. That's for Holly right there. What an awesome mug. Rock on, guys.